Out of the gates and ready to go. Outkick 360 underway, and what is going to be a jam-packed and fun show today, recapping all that was with the NCAA tournament. Kai Spears, the walk-on guard for Alabama. His attorney will be on with us later as we continue to dive into Brandon Miller's everything going on there with the gun, going back to the scene, and he's continuing to dominate and do great things for Alabama, who looks like the best team currently. We'll talk to Stephen Pitino, the attorney for Kai Spears. The accusation through a source to the New York Times, of course, saying that he was in the car with Brandon Miller that brought the gun to a scene in Tuscaloosa that ended up killing a young woman, a single mother at 23 years of age. Details there. Plus, Andrew Brandt, former front office guru for the Green Bay Packers. Now he dissects all things business and front office from the media perspective. Andrew joins us in hour number 3 with plenty of details on Aaron Rodgers and his comparison to Brett Favre. He would know something. He was in the front office for Green Bay whenever that trade went down. Chad, good afternoon.
Hutton, what I appreciate about you, what you did right there when you paused before saying the Brandon Miller, you could have used like a dust-up predicament, but you were trying to think of the right word to give the right weight to the situation. This is something that Nate Oates failed to do when discussing it. It's something that Greg Gumbel, quite frankly, failed to do on the selection show, where he had a poor choice of words to describe what he's doing. But what you did here, and what we try to do on this show, is we're thoughtful. Words matter, right? Well, we tried to find the right word to get it. It paused you. And I appreciate that about you, that you stopped before saying the wrong thing that both Nate Oates has used, that Greg Gumbel has used, that many people have used in describing this, what I would call situation, I guess, with Brandon Miller is a safe way to say it. But you do not want to underplay what's going on here with the gravity of the situation, obviously with the murder and the young woman, but also with the disastrous way in which Alabama has handled this whole thing. But on the flip side of that coin, the beautiful way in which the basketball has continued to play out for Alabama. They look great, even when Brandon Miller's not scoring, even when he's not shooting a good percentage at all in round 2. They are blowing people out. They have a great route now to the Final Four and the national championship. Alabama's never been to a Final Four as a basketball program, never won a national championship. After this first weekend, I think that all changes this season. Dan Dakich will join us coming up in about 20 minutes. Plenty to discuss with him on his observations, especially with the Big Ten. And Izzo continues to win with Michigan State. Meanwhile, Indiana not there. Dakich with us coming up in a matter of minutes. Chad, this was a weekend that it always happens, right? You have the upsets, you have the storylines. And over the weekend, with all of the great drama playing out. Friday, whenever we signed off, Saturday, Sunday, no different. I got to thinking about the expansion. There is a NCAA transformation committee with a recommendation. Commissioner Sankey from the SEC is a member of this transformation committee, and they're recommending that the tournament and all postseason tournaments expand to include 25% of all member institutions for more inclusion for postseason play. What that would do for college basketball with the NCAA tournament and all the madness, it would expand, hypothetically here, but a recommendation from 68 to 90. And while I'm all for the Cinderella story and more teams getting in for that drama, I don't think, based on what Michael Lazarus, the bracketologist at Yahoo, says, I don't think it creates more drama and more situations for what we've seen from Fairleigh Dickinson, or from Princeton, or from Furman this year. UMBC with Virginia, the first 16 to knock off a 1, or St. Peter's last year, knocking off Kentucky. So the Transformation Committee released a 48-page document a couple of months ago. And a part of this is a description of what the tournament and the bracket would look like. And it took the field of 68 and we see a snapshot of 22 more teams through Lazarus at Yahoo. And it's a bunch of those 22. 16 of the 22 additional teams of the at-large are from the Power 6 programs. We have 10 of the 14 SEC teams represented, including 16 win Florida.
You have every one of the Big 12 teams in. The entire conference would get in based on what the committee told us this year on who they put in and who they didn't. Oklahoma finished below 500. They would get a spot in this expanded tournament. And the last team in is Wake Forest in a field of 90. Not some team from a Sun Belt or from Conference USA. It's Wake Forest in a terrible down year for the ACC. But here's what it doesn't really bring for me. Teams ranked in the top 32, Chad, the top 32 seeds, they are going to get a first-round bye. So what this ends up doing, based on what we've seen already through this tournament, and then we'll get to the headlines of every game, we would not see Furman in Virginia. We would not see Fairleigh Dickinson, who shouldn't even have been in the tournament because they could not beat Merrimack. But Merrimack doesn't qualify for the tournament yet, so Fairleigh Dickinson got in, and then they won against Purdue. We would not see other great upsets in the past, in over the past 3 or 4 years, where a 15 seed continues to win and advance to the Sweet 16. We would see Fairleigh Dickinson against Mississippi State to open the tournament. And that's just not good, I don't think, because you open the tournament with the option of seeing something happen in history made before your very eyes, and instead you're probably going to end up with Power 6 versus Power 6. And I think that's extremely unfortunate. UMBC would not have played Virginia, or hypothetically, St. Peter's doesn't even make it to an option or opportunity to play Kentucky. They can't get that watered down with this, based on what we're starting to see, which is the lower seeds are coming up and meeting now this overall play, where I don't think it's as large of a gap as what we've seen in decades past, for sure, of the 1 through 4 seed line paired against anyone below 8 or 9. They can't get this nuance with it.
I can understand the math behind it, that you've added so many Division I teams. You're now in the 360s or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you should add tournament teams at some point.
So 25%, yeah.
Yeah, so I can understand that part of, you add a bunch of teams, well, you should probably think about adding at some point more NCAA tournament teams. Where I come down on this and where I struggle is making the NCAA tournament should be a big-time accomplishment. I do think that when you're a program that just you're a blue blood or a team accustomed to making it, any program out there under a certain coach that's been successful, fan bases can take for granted making the tournament year in and year out. That happens a lot of the time, and it doesn't become as much of an accomplishment for a lot of programs. But I still think it should matter. There are contract escalators and contracts for coaches for making the NCAA tournament. It should be an accomplishment. Being one of 68 teams, that's the goal when you go into the season. It should be something that matters for every program that makes it. But Hutton, to your point, where it really matters is what we saw Friday night. Fairleigh Dickinson with a chance to do something only for the second time in the history of the sport, and that is be a number 16 seed to knock off a number 1. And they accomplished that. They accomplished what UMBC did against Virginia a few years ago. Having those chances, even when the games don't fall the underdog's way, Cinderella's way.
Right.
But having a chance to fight in games like that. Texas A&M Corpus Christi the other day. We joked that, well, they can at least say they forced Alabama to call a second half timeout on a 7-0 run at some point. That could be their story for the rest of their lives. That is an accomplishment. So seeing that big-time Cinderella have the chance, that's what we lose with this expanded field. I don't like that part of it. We're going to get to all the big stories from this weekend, but here's the simple part of it to me when I watch the NCAA tournament. Do not fix what's not broken. That is this tournament. It delivers every single year. Every time we think, man, we might have a dud of a day, Fairleigh Dickinson beats Purdue. Or we think, man, it looks like all these teams are playing well and these teams are, and boom, there's another surprise here with a team that's not playing well that beats a team that's on a red-hot streak. This tournament, especially in that first weekend, always, always delivers. This is where we want Cinderellas. Now, what I think
it's about the money.
What the NCAA would tell you, and a reason to get these, 16 other Power 5 teams you talked about, or 14 other, whatever the number is?
There would be 22 more at large, and based on
14
the bracket,
or 16.
16 of the 22 would be Power 6.
I think adding those teams in gives you a stronger likelihood of a team that barely gets in being the one that makes it the second weekend. because where the money lies in the second weekend, we'll probably see this. We'll find out after next weekend. But I do think ratings will go down. Why? No Duke, no Kentucky, no Kansas, no Indiana. We typically want Arizona. We want more of the blue blood programs the second weekend and beyond.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that this year. We love Princeton in week 1. We love them knocking off Arizona. We love them just blistering Mizzou. But we going to love Princeton in this Sweet 16? Probably not from a rating standpoint. That's shown time and time again, those teams that eyeballs aren't on them. But, man, of all the things not to mess with, I think this NCAA tournament format is one right now that I watch this weekend and think, do not mess with it.
And I'm thinking we have great storylines and drama, and we probably get some of it, but not nearly to this extent. And we don't see the bets that we saw over the weekend, Chad, from DraftKings, where we have a guy who placed a $33,000 bet on Fairleigh Dickinson money line to beat Purdue, and he ends up winning $495,000 based on that bet for Dickinson to knock off the Purdue Boilermakers.
That is a fairly ridiculous amount.
Yes, it is.
For Fairleigh Dickinson. I'm using that reference. Nicole Auerbach, who writes for The Athletic, tweeted that Fairleigh Dickinson for a long time was known as a huge party school, and that people that went there called it Fairly Ridiculous University for their party scene. So that is not a fairly ridiculous, absurdly ridiculous amount of money to win on a game.
Insane. And to know
credit to that gentleman, though, or that lady.
And they're playing the odds here where Purdue has now lost to a 13, a 15, and a 16 seed. And they've had good teams, including last year, Jaden Ivey and Zach Edey were on that team. And you have, of course, this year, National Player of the Year to be Zach Edey on that team as well. We'll get into that with Dakich coming up. Chad, they were not the only team to fall early in this tournament. Kentucky also did. And Calipari says he has empathy for the sentiment that there should be a better nucleus, a better result, and a greater leadership within the program to produce results that win in the tournament. He empathizes with the players, but he also said post-game, hey, K-State won. We tell our guys, don't come here if you don't want to meet these expectations. It's just different. And he says, I would tell it to any coach as well, because only certain coaches can come here and deal with the stress and the finger pointing and the microscope that's on the Kentucky Wildcats program. But, Chad, here they are again with more questions. And I'm betting this time they don't bring back a lot of the vets that they did a year ago.
So since 2020, Kentucky, in 2020, COVID-19 happened, pandemic starts, no tournament. 2021, they went 9-16, failed to make the tournament. Last year, they lose to St. Peter's as a number 2 seed in round number 1. This year, they go out in the second round. John Calipari has not been to a Final Four since 2015, 7 years ago. Won the national title in year 3 on the job in 2012, as he took over Kentucky. Won national championship, has not been to a Final Four since 2015. Now, plenty of programs would love that and say, hey, that's pretty good. Now, that's not, you can't go to the Final Four every year. Not Kentucky.
Right.
Tubby Smith got ran off for less. Tubby Smith won a national title in year 1, and I feel like he got ran off for less. Now, the albatross around Kentucky is the fact that even if they part ways next year with John Calipari, they owe him over $33 million in buyout money. He's got a quote-unquote lifetime contract that takes him until he's 70 years old in 2029 to finish out his career at Kentucky. But I don't think Kentucky, even with that amount of money, is going to wait around if this trend continues. Here is what I see with Kentucky basketball right now and their program. It's not a program. It's an AAU traveling conglomerate. And even when they try to have some consistency and they bring back good players and they bring back the National Player of the Year and Oscar Tshiebwe, they go out in the second round and they have a widely disappointing season. They had their highs this year. They had a couple wins over Tennessee. They had a big road win at Arkansas, who's now maybe about to go to the – hello, Eric Musselman, by the way, who Kentucky fans want in Lexington right now. But it was a disappointing year for Kentucky. And what I see with John Calipari is less program and more AAU system. And what I hear from Kentucky fans when I put out the question, what's your temperature on John Calipari now? And the response is, Let's give him next year with this super class that's coming in. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, have we heard this song and dance before. Let's let the freshmen save us. Here comes all these 5-star guys. They're going to come in, and hey, if he doesn't go to the Final Four next year, then he should be fired. Well, when they have a great year next year and they get put out in the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, I don't think Kentucky fans will still be singing that same tune, because they're still going to have that siren song that they're going to be lured into of, here comes the next 5 McDonald's All-Americans. And we cycle them out, and guys transfer out. We'll bring in the occasional veteran transfer also. Rinse and repeat and see if you can make it work. I don't see a program culture with Calipari other than it being transient. And that's not a good spot to be in.
But the portal it's shaped Kentucky's roster way different than what we're used to, right? The one and dones are now one and done and on their way to the other team, to the highest bidder, and with name, image, likeness, and everything that can be taken care of in the transfer portal. Chad,
and it's not just one and done. Let me say this too, and I'm quoting Dan Dakich here from Don't At Me, because I was on with him this morning. Dan's son coaches at Illinois State. Dan claims that Antonio Reeves got $500,000 in NIL money to transfer to Kentucky. That is what Kentucky and the major programs can do. Not just the one and done, but the one and done on the reverse end, or the two and done. Go get the stud mid-major player that can come in and immediately make an impact as a veteran guy. John Calipari is going to do that. I think he's going to mix and match with both of them. But when I look at certain programs and they have an identity, Marquette, even though they got bounced in the second round, I watch them and I think that is Shaka Smart's group. Regardless of where they come from or how they were put together in year 2, I know exactly what Marquette is because I know exactly what Shaka Smart wants it to be. So I don't get the sense that I know what Calipari wants. I don't know that he knows exactly what he wants. And for that reason, Kentucky's just this annual all-star team and not really a program.
But we've seen different ways to go about last year to this year. North Carolina's in the same boat too with Kentucky, where they brought back guys that, automatically you're seeing what Carolina did in the tournament last year. And you have Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky, who's coming back on that NIL money. And he's coming back. You're going to build around him. They're going to be fine coming off the loss to St. Peter's. Meanwhile, Duke is a young roster, right? And you've got a young head coach there now. Coach K's not there. And they're on the upward trajectory, regardless of how things went for them in the battle royale in Tennessee. I view their roster way different than I do Kentucky and North Carolina currently, because I think it changed the mentality of recruitment for both of those coaches at the Blue Bloods. And I think we'll see Calipari go back to the high school era where he's putting Anthony Davis in and they're winning the title and he's off to the league. And there are other examples for sure. But Coach Cal is great at that. And recently Chad, I think he's been closer to building a program because guys are coming back to play for him more than one season or one semester.
So no Final Four since 2015. Yep. No tourney, losing season in 2021.
Yeah.
And give him, I guess, the COVID break coming into that weird season. First round exit as a 2 seed last year. Second round exit as a 6 seed this year. And if they go to the Final Four next year, he's going to be just fine. I understand all of that. But let's say it's another second round exit next year and they're a 5 or 6 seed. Are you just going to sit around and say, well, all these guys are going to the pro. Let's get the next batch, next 4 or 5 guys to come in. We're going to go back to that route. Is that really what you want, Kentucky fans? Is that really the road you want to try to go back down? It worked early for John Calipari. It has not worked in a while for that program. And I'll ask this question. Hubert Davis went to the national championship game in year 1 at North Carolina. They were the number 1 team in the AP to open the season and did not make the tournament. If they are not, I'll just say it. This is my declaration. If they're not a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament next year, he will be fired at North Carolina. That is how Blue Bloods treat their coaches.
And in 7 of the 8 years you're referencing with Kentucky, during the season in the AP poll, they have been top 5 at some point. And the year they missed the tournament, they ranked 10th. That's the highest they were.
Even a program that's not a blue blood, but a guy who had tons of early success, Juwan Howard, who just got bounced in the second round of the NIT. If he doesn't make the tournament and do something next year, or they're not a top, let's say, 8 seed in the tournament, he's in trouble. And that's not a blue blood program. I think John Calipari, at least with Kentucky fans, I understand defending your guy. I don't think he's being judged or treated the same way as some other blue blood programs would view their coach on a similar downward trajectory. And that's where Kentucky is right now. They are on a downward trajectory.
Dan Dakich is about to join us. Purdue, they fell out. Indiana, out. We'll take a look at the Big Ten, and keep this in mind, too. 11 conferences are represented in the Sweet 16. Dan Dakich reacts to that next on Outkick 360.
Arizona gives Corbin Carroll, 22-year-old Corbin Carroll, he of all 115 Major League plate appearances, a 8-year, $111 million deal. All guaranteed. Club has, I think, a 9th-year option for $23 million or something like that. But yeah. And Bill, we were talking earlier. This is the fusion, or this is where old school baseball and sabermetrics meet, and I think they butt heads. Because in my mind, this is sabermetrician saying, okay, all of his other numbers, all of his underlying numbers from college and the minor leagues tell us that he's going to be this $100 million player, so we're going to save some money and sign him. Whereas the old school guys would be like, hey, you know what? Give me a year or two of production, and then we'll take care of you. I just think that there's I mean, obviously as a player, who wouldn't love it? But as a team, no chance. No chance, given the physical nature of the game, given the challenge of the schedule, and the human factor. I mean, how is he going to handle a slump in the big leagues? How's he going to handle the 14-day East Coast road trips? I mean, there's just so many things. I believe I mean, this is one of those guys that almost, I feel like Chipper Jones or Alex Rodriguez, when you see him, you know, he's a can't miss. And I believe he is, but I don't believe to the tune of $111 million. So, I mean, I'm curious, as a fan of a team, is this something that excites you or something that worries you?
It worries me a great deal because, as you're saying, and it doesn't matter to me what the GM was thinking, but basically he's saying, I know this kid's going to be great.
Right.
And if all of a sudden he levels off and is a 240 hitter who's stealing a couple bases and doesn't have major league power, you're stuck with $111 million over the next 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a very, I don't want to say very common, but you're seeing this over the last 5 years more than you've ever seen it in the history of the game combined. It just never happened. I mean, you know, guys like Soto and you know, Machado and all these young guys who got good deals young or bigger deals young. I don't know. I mean, listen, it's not my money. So as a fan, you shouldn't care. Although, is this a guy? I think the answer is yes. This is a centerpiece, right? This is a guy that you plan to have in the middle of your lineup, in the middle of your defense. Obviously, I'm assuming he's going to bring some stuff in the clubhouse as well. But this is a sign of modern baseball, for all it's worth, for whatever you want to take that for. It's a different game.
The other thing, Kurt, that you said, and you've said this in earlier podcasts, but this is the first time these kids are on fields where they're not the best player on the field.
Right.
Everybody else is as good as you.
Right.
Well,
this is a contract where the Diamondbacks are saying this kid will continue to be the best player on the field. Right. And I guess if you're looking for the 5-tool guy, this is it, right? I mean, you're talking about a 25 homer, 300 hitting, 400 on base percentage, 50 steal, Gold Glove caliber, you know. And if that's the player, which, you know, God bless him if he is, if that's the player, then this turns out to be a great deal.
Rick Pitino is headed to St. John's as their new head coach. No surprise. We'll get into that with Dan Dakich in just a moment. Dan Dakich joins us on Outkick 360 here across the Outkick Network, recapping and breaking down the bracket from a fun weekend. Dan, always great, man, to see you. Thanks for the time. And 11 conferences are represented in the Sweet 16. How would you describe what we witnessed on Saturday and Sunday?
An absolute blast. Maybe not for Purdue fans, maybe not for UVA, Arizona fans, but yeah, I guess not Indiana fans. But you know what? At the end of the day, what a blast. I mean, you saw Blue Bloods going down left and right. You saw, Kentucky 1 beats a 16. Again, that's Purdue. I thought the entire weekend was tremendous. And to your point about 11 conferences, I don't really pay attention to that. But I got to believe that that's some kind of record, right? I mean, Big Ten, no good. Izzo does what Izzo does. I think the Pac-12 underperformed, except for UCLA. But, man, I just thought it was an absolute blast. And I miss it already, and it's only Monday afternoon.
What happened to Indiana in this game, Dan? I asked because I had the Hoosiers in the Final Four, and no one cares about my bracket. But I think, once again, what I've done here is maybe I undervalued Miami, who's a team that went on a run last year also with Isaiah Wong. I think beat Auburn in the second round a year ago in an upset matchup. What is it about this Miami team in the tournament, and what happened to Indiana?
Well, I think what happened in Indiana is, a lot of people call the Big Ten the thick ankle league, and Indiana had a bunch of thick ankles against dudes that were going. Isaiah Wong was ridiculous, and you know what was also interesting? They made Indiana quit. They physically beat them up. They went on the glass. Indiana is a weird team. And I know I'm being old man guy here, but Indiana used to stand for something like toughness, and now Indiana, you got guys, Miller Kopp, he's more worried about his headband and his Twitter and his TikTok videos, and he's trying to build a brand, and his teammate. You know what? It's kind of exhausting. It wasn't really a surprise. I thought Indiana played really poorly in the first half, in particular against Kent. Kent just missed a bunch of shots, and I told some guys, I go, look, if you're really going to bet this game with your head and not your heart, you're going to have to bet on Miami. I don't care what the point spread is, because Miami's not going to miss those shots. Indiana got exposed. They quit. They have no heart. And frankly, going into the game, I got so many texts from former Indiana players that, and this may seem weird to people, and I get that it does, but this is our program, Indiana. What in the F is this guy doing, Miller Kopp, worrying about a headband? Didn't wear one all year, and all of a sudden, Indiana's supposed to be about us, not me. And frankly, Miami has athletes, have guys that can score, have a big guy that's tougher than heck, and they were way better. Better team won. Better team was more interested. Better team played harder, and better team won.
So in the biggest upset of the weekend, I saw a stark lack of athleticism with Purdue. And I didn't watch a ton of Purdue this year, and they were able to bully ball people with Edey down low, Dan. But I'm watching that game and thinking, this is Zach Edey, a big monster down low with 4 stiffs surrounding him that can't do anything against FDU's quickness. Is this a culture problem with Matt Painter and Purdue, or is this simply a lack of athletic talent problem for Matt Painter at Purdue?
Well, I think they got exposed. Matt Painter won the Big Ten tournament, and people are on him. Like, they want him to be gone. And I'm like, okay, well, be careful what you wish for. But to your point, something happened in the last 4 minutes. I think you and I talked about this morning. I've never seen this before. People always talk about, and this goes to the quickness of Fairleigh Dickinson and the lack of quickness from Purdue. Purdue's guards were freshmen and both really good. Braden Smith, Mr. Basketball here, Foster Lawyer or Fletcher Lawyer is a nice player. They're both played really well all year against the Big Ten, but I've never seen this, and I've been watching basketball. I've been involved in college basketball since the fall of 1981, watching it since 1973. I don't think I've ever seen this. Purdue's guards would go to the basket in the last 4 minutes of the game. The Fairleigh Dickinson guards, now the guards, not the big guy, not a help side defender, blocked Purdue's guards 4 times. Now, what that is in basketball, that means I'm hot defensively. I got you. There's a cuss word that comes after it involving a mother and having sex. So I'm going to tell you, I got you. It just is the way it goes. I got you. There's nothing you're doing to me. You got by me, but here I am. I'm swatting. It happened 4 times in the last 4 or 5 minutes of the game. I swear to God, look, I get it. A big guy comes over and blocks a shot. We get all that. But that told me that, Fairleigh Dickinson was in the grill of Purdue, and there wasn't nothing Purdue's going to do about it. And also, I have a very good friend that I have a ton of respect for, a longtime NBA scout. He's one of the guys that I go to talk basketball with when I want to get serious about it. And he was there, and he goes, look, Dan, he goes, I got to tell you, the tension in that building from the get-go, he was sitting in the Purdue section, he goes, unbelievable. He goes, it's unbelievable. And he goes, the guys were so tight. Guys are shooting the ball offside of the backboard. Purdue went 14 of 42 from people other than Edey. You're absolutely right. They got exposed. Big Ten got exposed. There's your champ. And you can't beat Fairleigh Dickinson off the dribble. You can't go dominate them athletically. I blame the Purdue players. Look, you've had your brains beat out. You had to have an unbelievable effort. They didn't bring it. They were nervous. They were uptight. Moment too big. And when the moment's too big in March, guess what? You go home.
Dan Dakich is the host of Outkick's Don't At Me, weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Outkick Network. Dan, how many teams of the 16 can win a national championship this year?
Man, I got to tell you, if every team's playing really well, Alabama wins the national championship. You know, I think, again, in my opinion, watching, and I know Brandon Miller didn't have a bunch of points, but boy, is he good. I mean, he is so freaking good. Like, I don't know, you know, he's the best I saw, and Alabama was the best team. I don't really think Izzo's team can win. I do think Houston can. Houston, their second half against Auburn was incredible to me. Like, incredible. Auburn has a culture where they're going to play hard, and they just got belly-whomped. So I think they can win a national championship. I think UConn can win a national championship. I think Gonzaga can win a national championship. Look, I would have said Duke could have, but I don't know squat. Those are the teams, and maybe I'm missing one somewhere here. I'm not big on Xavier winning it, but those are the teams that I think can win a national championship. Creighton can score enough. I don't think they're defensively good enough or high-end enough. But the teams that I mentioned, I think can win. I don't think Michigan State can. Probably can get to a Final Four, but I don't think they can win a national championship.
Dan, I saw something happen over the weekend. I immediately thought, I cannot wait to ask Dan Dakich about this on Monday because I know you'll have an opinion. I have no idea what that opinion will be, but I thought, I know Dan's going to have a strong opinion on this. What did you think about Eric Musselman going WWE and tearing his shirt off in celebration with the Arkansas crowd after beating Kansas? My wife had a very different reaction to this that I'll tell you about than I had to it. But what did you think?
I love it. I love all of it. Like, I know I come off as a dorky old white guy, but I like some stuff. Like, I like the kid trying a 360 dunk for FAU at the end of the game. Everybody was whining about it. Hell, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. Go for it. I love what Musselman did because I like different. I like people that are exuberant. Look, nothing great has ever been accomplished without enthusiasm. And the effort that everybody, including Musselman, his staff, Key Smart's on that staff, and the players put into it is off the charts. And sometimes, you know what, you just lose your mind, man. My friend Seth Greenberg calls it an out-of-body experience, and he's not wrong. I got to tell you, man, I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, but I thought it was fantastic.
My wife hated it. I loved it too. I'm like you. I thought it was funny. I thought it was fun in the moment. She said, this is a leader of young men, and he's out here doing this, and he needs to keep his shirt on and act like an adult. This is ridiculous the way he's acting. Something else I think is ridiculous, Dan, is the notion that Rick Barnes is suddenly a dirty coach. And Rick Barnes was asked about this today because a lot in the media are saying Tennessee played, quote, dirty against Duke. And Rick Barnes said, I think playing good, hard basketball is something nice to watch. I know our guys played hard. I know Duke played hard. From my perspective, I didn't see anything dirty from either team. What do you think about the notion of playing dirty in the NCAA tournament, and is that what you saw with Tennessee on Saturday?
Hey, man, play dirty, play clean, be sportsman, be unsportsman, just survive and advance. Look, you do you, and I'll do me. That's what I used to tell coaches in our coaches meetings in the MAC. I'd be like, hey, look, you can run it up on me, you can do whatever, and don't complain to me. I don't care. You do you. Rick Barnes' team is not dirty. Rick Barnes' team plays hard. If you're too soft, don't show up. And Duke was way too soft. Look, And I get it. The national media has to complain about something. I don't know why you'd complain about that. It's a great story. You lose your point guard, Ziegler. Next thing you know, you're playing against 87,000, first round draft choices, the greatest young coach in the history of basketball. Coach K's culture is still intact. And you whooped them, literally whooped them physically. I don't want to hear it. I think any media guy that asks that question in such a way that convicts Rick Barnes of doing something nefarious or his team being dirty needs to be shunned. That's right. I said shunned. I don't like the shunned. My first wife used to shun me, and I hated it. When I put you on the shun, that's bad business for you. Anybody asking that question to Rick Barnes needs to be shunned with a giant S on their shirt because they're too stupid, they're too soft. Go work for Disney. Go work for ESPN. Be woke, be stupid, but don't bring that crap around here because Tennessee plays basketball defensively the way basketball is supposed to be played. They're tough, they're physical, they're relentless, and if you can't handle it, then guess what? You go home and they get to move on to the Sweet 16.
Don't at him or shun him. Dan Dakich with us on Outkick 360. Rick Pitino to St. John's. Chad hit this last week where there was a thirst from Pitino and that job, and he lands it. It's the worst-kept secret going. What do you think about Pitino there?
Man, I think it's about ready to get sexy, and I don't mean that figurative, or I don't mean that literally with Pitino, but it's about ready to get sexy.
I think it's literal, too.
I remember when they...
I think you can be literal with that also. Figuratively and literally.
It's going to be 15 seconds worth of sexy, baby, there, but no. When they hired Lavin, I said, man, how stupid are you? Like, how dumb are you? Lavin's doesn't do anything. He doesn't have a weight program. He doesn't have individual workouts. He basically shows and goes. Pitino's the exact opposite. Pitino's a guy that's going to drive everybody. 6-year deal. He says he can coach till 80. He's in great shape. What a great move. I mean, this is not easy, and I lived it, and I learned it, and I didn't do it. But when you're in a mid-major league and all of a sudden you come in the 2 years you're there, you go to the NCAA tournament, you got to win the conference tournament, which means a fluke didn't happen to you. I had 2 times flukes happen to me, and we didn't go to the tournament. I mean, I wasn't a good enough coach to handle a fluke. Pitino puts his team in a position where a fluke isn't going to beat him. It is going to get on. It is on. And St. John's. That is the best thing that St. John's could have possibly done. It's the worst thing for guys like Thad Matta over here at Butler. It's the worst thing for a guy like Ed Cooley going to Georgetown or whoever's going to replace him at Providence. It's the worst thing for the rest of the Big East. But it's a great thing for St. John's, and I can't wait to watch. I'm a big Rick Pitino fan. I wasn't, but I became one. And you know what? We competed when I was an assistant at Indiana. I didn't like him. He was better than us. We weren't as good as them. Knight didn't work as hard in recruiting, and we kept losing players. But I've always respected him, and now I like him and respect him and think he's going to do an unbelievable job. Get ready, Big East.
What's Calipari thinking privately?
Woo! Privately, he's thinking, thank God I signed that $9 million deal years ago, and if they fire my sorry ass, then they got to pay me for a long, long time. Seriously, that's what he's thinking privately. He also might be thinking one of 2 things. You can look at the glass half full because that's what we do at Kentucky. We say, well, the recruiting class coming in is going to set us free. Yeah, all right, pull this, it plays Jingle Bells. Or he's thinking, oh, man, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do here, because he's usually one step ahead of the posse. He's probably got his agent calling NBA teams. He's probably sniffing around different things very privately, very clandestinely, because let's not make no mistake. Calipari's in a situation where, frankly, you just got to win. He tried to BS the troops by talking about, what did they have, 5 first-round draft choices a few years ago, and this is the best day in the history of Kentucky basketball. He tried to BS the troops, but I'll say this about Kentucky basketball fans. They know their hoops, and they know the difference between nonsense and real, and Kentucky's tried to pull a little wool over their eyes, but the play on the court does not lie. And I thought this, guy, I swear to God, both Seth Greenberg, who's a great friend of Cal, and myself, who's a friend of Cal, we were texting yesterday going, this is the worst team I've ever seen at Kentucky during Cal's time. I know they were bad a couple years ago, but this team has no skill. I mean, they paid $500,000 for this kid Reese to leave Illinois State and go to Kentucky, And that dude, I think he went 0 for a lifetime. You got to show up in big games when you're at Kentucky. You got to show. Same thing I've said about Duke, Indiana, North Carolina. Hey, man, don't show up if you're going to be afraid when the big boy lights come on. I mean the Klieg lights. I mean the big ones in Kentucky did not show, but they didn't show because they're not very talented. They're not very good.
Dan's show starts at 9 a.m. Eastern. He always shows up for that.
He's both talented and good,
yeah.
Dan Dakich.
Well, we look forward to tomorrow morning's show. It's always great, especially during tournament time.
We got Dusty May from FAU coming on. Izzo's coming on. I think Scott Drew's coming on tomorrow. It's a potpourri of coaching greats. So we'll look forward to it 9 a.m. on Don't At Me.
Mr. March, Izzo, on Don't At Me tomorrow morning.
Yeah, he is.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate you.
Yeah, he is. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Dan Dakich there. Don't At Me with Dan Dakich, mornings 9 a.m. Eastern here on the network. Chad, another Cinderella story, and this time it's Princeton. And when Princeton won, social media was on fire. That's next on Outkick 360. Brady recently retiring. Your locker was very close to Tom's locker, wasn't
right next to 12, yeah.
What was that like?
Man, it was cool, man. He's a funny dude, man. He's a nice guy. Joke with him every day. You know, he's a good dude, man. He's probably one of the only dudes that I know that walk around in a bathrobe in the locker room, bro. So
you go up against him in practice all the time. Could you see that big jump coming from Daniel Jones going into this season?
Man, when I first played against Daniel, you know, coming in last year and seeing him work, man, I knew, you know, the talent that he had. It was just one of those things where, you know, you always hear the saying, God's timing is always right. It was just one of those moments where you knew eventually it was going to click and everything was going to work out, not just for him, but for us as a team. And I'm just so happy for him.
Which video game are you most proud of making the cover for?
Oh, definitely Madden. Madden, yeah. Like I remember I come from a big family. My mom had 6 sisters and 1 brother, and a lot of cousins, 30-some cousins, and you know. And I remember one of the younger ones was like, "Man, you're on Madden. You're really good." And I was like, "Cuz, like, I was the high school #1 player in the country.
Yeah.
I broke every record at Alabama, All-American. I get the pros. I'd won the MVP already. You know?
Yeah.
Been to the Super Bowl, won the MVPs. Like, now because of Madden, now you're cool." I was like, "Oh, okay."
You had done a few things.
Yeah. You know, now I'm good. Okay, all right. Well, that's how it works in y'all's minds.
And I remember when I first started working in the morning news. Shout out to Drew Kaliski, super producer for NFL Today. He was just talking about season. How you feeling? You know, you ready to go? Are you excited? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like awkwardly hesitating to ask me a question. And I'm like, what's up, man? Speak your piece. And he's like, do you know what's going on in the NFL? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, do you know who plays for what teams and who's been traded where? I'm like, yeah, bro. What do you think? I'm living under a rock? And this is my job. I'm studying just like anything else.
How much fun are you having staying attached to the game and being able to talk about it weekly?
It is beautiful for me. I enjoy football. I enjoy our family at NBC, and we get to cover some great games. But to do different projects, you know, I got to go to Jacksonville and interview Doug Peterson for the game and talk about his impact of what he's done, not only for the team, but in the city of Jacksonville. Those are the kind of special things. I got to go to Buffalo and cover a game up there and actually did a chapel service for the Bills before the game. And I got to meet DeMar Hamlin and some of those guys, and that have become kind of in the forefront of things since that incident on Monday night.
Now it's almost like the SEC and everybody else. And so if you end up going to the Big 12, it's like, oh, well, you may not have gotten an offer from a SEC school. You go to Pac-12, and it's like, nah, well, you're going to get lost out there. So it's just tough with the competition, but we got to bring some recruits in.
You were a Big East guy. You
Yeah.
played in the Big East. Do you like the move to the ACC for Syracuse? It's been a while now, but did you like it at the time? What do you think now?
I'm on the board of trustees, and I'm a alum. I'm a alum from that. Now I'm retired, but it was a decision I helped make. But I just always thought it was going to be tough moving to the ACC and competing in all of our sports.
Can a running back today in the league win MVP?
They would have to score a lot of touchdowns. Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, like the yards are starting to get taken for granted a little bit, and so you got to need yards and touchdowns. And, Adrian's done it, LaDainian, I, and then I think you got to go back to like Marshall and Emmett, right?
Yeah, it's been
So so it's a big gap now, and I think that you have to have the touchdowns and yards both to get it.
Chad, question for you. How does an Ivy League school crush it, dominate on the boards against a Pac-12 and an SEC basketball program in a span of 3 days?
Athletic intelligence, maybe. Sheer grit.
I don't know how you do it.
Hustle, effort, knowing angles. Good geometry, guys. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities as to how this would happen.
Missouri,
but it was amazing to watch.
Missouri was so concerned, and I would be too, with the Princeton offense, which is not nearly what it was, but they're certainly there. They backed in that zone, and then Princeton hit 12 threes. Sharpshooting. But even on the boards, they're getting second chance opportunities.
Well, and once Princeton won, I knew this would happen, but it led to some of the best jokes on the internet. The internet never disappoints when things like this happen, and immediately the tweets started flying. Front Office Sports, by the way, let us know that Princeton is the only team in the NCAA tournament without any players on athletic scholarship. The Ivy League doesn't allow them, only provides need-based aid. Now, to this I say, okay, that's great. They're all on some sort of scholarship. They find ways to get guys in that are good basketball players on scholarship for the most part, where they're not paying if they want them. Some really funny tweets, though, that came through.
Yeah, Matt Damon.
Another one was
with Goodwill Hunting.
Yeah,
on how to figuring out how to upset Arizona in round one for Princeton.
I love this.
Beating up on the SEC was another one.
Normally, if someone from Princeton is beating up on the SEC, this from Roger Sherman. Normally, if someone from Princeton is beating up on the SEC this badly, it's a Republican senator dismantling the Securities and Exchange Commission of the SEC. Also a terrific joke. Maybe one of my favorite ones was the LinkedIn profile that someone dug up of Ryan Langborg, who just destroyed Missouri from 3 in this game. And when you look up his LinkedIn profile, the tweet says, this man just led Princeton to the Sweet 16. His experience is as an acquisition analyst intern for JPI companies in San Diego, California. And a picture that is straight up out of LinkedIn because that's where it is. But it also may be his Princeton player profile. It looks like he's in the orange tie. So this is probably also their roster photo that he is using. Terrific. This is the second time that I believe ever the Ivy Leagues had. Cornell had it in 2016. They reached the Sweet 16. That an Ivy League played Kentucky in that Sweet 16. I remember Kentucky won, but that an Ivy League schools advanced the Sweet 16. Lots of fun. And they were dominating in that game, start to finish.
I know.
They just wrecked Missouri.
They coasted to the victory. Davey Hudson here in studio also tweeted this weekend. Princeton has more NCAA tournament wins in the last 4 days than Kentucky does in the last 4 years. Correct. And that's why there's heat in the Commonwealth.
That's an amazing stat. This is right up there from Davey with the stat about Tony Bennett, where he won all of his NCAA tournament games in 1 year and then hasn't won around that when they won the national title.
There's a big discussion, of course, with Matt Painter and what's going on at Purdue with the way they've lost recently and the stretch of losses in the NCAA tournament, losing to a 13, a 15, and now a 16 seed. And you bring up Tony Bennett, and I think as far as like clean coaches go, Matt Painter and Tony Bennett are certainly in that category, right? Like Coach Cal would not be placed in that category.
No.
These two guys are. And I think it's I'm fascinated now to watch what they'll do to tweak these programs because the Big Ten plays through the paint, but whenever you get to the tournament, it's through the guard play. And that's what we saw here where they didn't, Chad, you're right, the athleticism for Purdue, not there. We've seen now, and Purdue, last year also lost to St. Peter's. Just to tie in the Kentucky aspect to this, got some good programs during the season that are losing to teams they should not be losing to after all the things that they've accomplished over the last 4 or 5 months. Purdue's at the top of that list, of course, with Fairleigh Dickinson, who couldn't even play in the tournament if Merrimack were eligible because Merrimack beat them last weekend. But whenever they're tipping off, the previous weekend they were losing to Merrimack, and instead Merrimack is out because they did not qualify. They've got to be at a transition.
It's a 4-year transition. It's a stupid rule.
It's dumb.
I mean, if you're moving up, you should be eligible immediately. You're at a disadvantage. You should be when you move
There's
up.
got to be some academic thing, or I don't know.
Well, there's what the NCAA is saying. You have to prove your NCAA Division One
you qualify or
eligibility by showing you can meet all the parameters of it before you're eligible for comp. But I'm thinking that's whatever. Difference between the Northeast Conference and a lot of other ones. What we're talking. This is not the SEC. This is the NEC.
Mm-hmm.
Fairleigh Dickinson Friday night becomes the second 16 seed to ever beat a number 1 seed. And today, I'm looking at a statement from the Northeast Conference that is a statement from St. Francis College, who has eliminated its intercollegiate athletics program altogether. No one in the SEC is eliminating their athletics program on the day after one of their conference mates beats the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. That's the difference between a conference like the Northeast Conference and the Southeastern Conference when you look at the two. Here's what I think Purdue should do. Absolutely nothing. Matt Painter is who he is. This is who they are. They have a program. They have a culture. It was good enough to win the Big Ten. It was good enough to be a number 1 seed. If I had to nitpick at one thing, he needs better athletes, better quickness. But with him and Tony Bennett, I think it's a great comparison, Hutton. Very similar in that they have a clear identity in how they play and what they want in their program. They're wildly successful. And they're getting beaten by double-digit seeds in the NCAA tournament. But with those guys, with the success they've had, I don't know that you change anything.
Well, Bennett's at least got the title to point to.
I think you're better off, though. Purdue's got the one Elite Eight they've been to under Matt Painter. I think you're better off with both of them staying the course and seeing if 1 year it hits.
Well,
at some point, you got to think.
That's what happened with Lute Olson.
You're going to keep going to the tournament and getting a high seed and getting a high seed. And for Matt Painter, he's going to have that Tony Bennett breakthrough season.
And Lute Olson at one point lost to a 12, a 14, and a 15 seed. And those years, he had Damon Stoudemire, Sean Rooks, Miles Simon was a young guy on one of those rosters that year. And a couple of years later, they won the title. So, I mean, Matt Painter's certainly title worthy, but the trend that they're on, when it comes March, they're not marching past the first weekend or the first day. Coming up, Pitino, he's found a new home. We'll discuss what he's going to be doing expectation-wise at St. John's. This is Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, bold taste of a Southern legend.
Just like that, the second hour is here. Glad you're with us for Outkick 360. Coming up in 20 minutes, the attorney for Kai Spears at Alabama, Stephen Pitino, will join us. Plus, Andrew Brandt in an hour with the latest opinion and analysis of the back and forth between the Packers, the Jets, and Aaron Rodgers and a potential trade. Will we get there already? Andrew will tell us the complications behind the scenes. He would know. Same time frame for when Brett Favre, throughout his career, was traded to the Jets and Rodgers took over. Now it's Jordan Love's offense. And Andrew will join us in an hour, and we'll get plenty of discussion and talking points from the former front office guru for the Packers. Chad, a great weekend of hoops, and now we get the Iona fell out. Now we get the confirmation. Pitino to St. John's, and you and I both agree, like, this is a great fit. I know Georgetown was mentioned. Other programs are floated out there.
Also, by the way, Georgetown is now meeting with Ed Cooley from Providence, who got put out by Kentucky in the first round.
There reports are that he's taking the job. He's accepted the offer. He's put his home up for sale.
Yeah, but it's not official apparently, but he's finalizing or he's meeting with Georgetown officials on it, which has sparked this big debate about what's the better job between Providence, St. John's, and Georgetown. I feel like Georgetown's the best of those jobs. If I had to rank them, I'd probably go Georgetown, Providence, St. John's in that order. But with Rick Pitino and his ties to Madison Square Garden in New York City, him now coaching again in Madison Square Garden at St. John's is the best opportunity for Rick Pitino. And Rick Pitino at St. John's makes St. John's the best program of those three.
Well, it's also fit. Like, I think the best fit for Pitino is St. John's if he's going to take a job like that.
He's the best coach.
Cooley from Providence was that's a great question based on what you do if you're Ed Cooley. The reports are he's agreed to the terms. John Rothstein, Georgetown has hired Providence's Ed Cooley as their next head coach. So that is being reported from one of the best out there covering college basketball. And he also says that Pitino has agreed in principle to all things. If Pitino's presser is anywhere close to the way he stood and answered questions about the different job opportunities while he was still Iona's postseason head coach, we're in for a treat with Ricky P.
Well, he joked about he's going to have to break out his navigation because it's been so long since he's been to New York.
Or campus.
But he was giddy. He was asked about it. He was
laughing. Can't wait to see
he's
this campus.
I don't even know where Queens is anymore. I'm going to have to break out my navigation. He's giddy that he gets to go somewhere else, and highlighted every conference he's coached in and dominated in before. This is a great get for St. John's. This is perfection. And he probably does have 6 to 8 good years left, I think, to coach. Not on earth. I'm saying coaching. I didn't want to make it like Rick Pitino's going to die in 8 years. But I think he's got 6 to 8 good years left. I didn't mean to pause that out. 6 to 8 good years left to coach. This is a terrific get for St. John's. I think he will have them immediately, if not in the tournament in year one, relevant. In year one when he's at St. John's.
And the landscape now is perfect for Rick Pitino.
Yes.
You know, the transfer portal, you want to get to the league, go play for him for a year.
I also think that anyone that has ever been in trouble with any type of recruiting enticements, this is the time to get back in the game.
Yes.
Now's the time with NIL and everything else and the NCAA falling apart to where who cares? I think most of America, if you are the president or AD at a school, then, who cares? Now, we can get into Chris Beard and Nate Oates. I care more about that. And I would have some issues with that. Talking to a Kentucky buddy yesterday, talking about what happens to John Calipari if he's gone at some point. Who would Kentucky target? He said probably Musselman, but not Nate Oates because of everything going on this year at Alabama. Now, you can choose to believe that or not. If Kentucky I think Kentucky would probably look past that, quite frankly, if they could hire Nate Oates to be their head coach because of his success. But when it's other things, anything NCAA violation worthy, I think you clear the deck and don't care about those things right now.
As long as you're at a basketball school, right?
Yeah. And
don't say that to Mark
I don't want to
Stoops.
say Rick Pitino's just the recruiting violations with his stuff at Louisville, but it's fine. If you want to hire Rick Pitino, you're fine. You're not going to face some big blowback. He's going to win. He's one of the best college basketball coaches ever with the different places he's won.
And look what he did at Iona.
Yeah. I know they took it away, but won a national title at Louisville, won a national title at Kentucky, done it different places. Again, I think year one, he's going to step in there, bring in the right transfers. They're going to be a tournament team, and if not, they're going to be relevant in year one for a program that's been pretty bad.
Well, and then by year 3, how many teams get in the tournament? I mean,
yeah.
He'll have a tournament team.
It'll be much less meaningful when he gets in year 3.
That's where expectations are, though. And you get the right group. Look at Kansas State with the transfers. Arkansas and how they've turned things on with what Musselman's done there, who's used to turning over rosters from his NBA days. And he's certainly great at just coaching a new team and getting guys to gel at the right time. What a great storyline there. And the reaction after that win for Arkansas against Kansas, where the emotions were flowing based on how things have gone and how things have turned out, where they're now back in the Sweet 16. And, they join Gonzaga as the team now that you expect to get there all the time. Musselman's it was third straight based on what he's done?
He's going for his third straight Elite Eight.
But
if he wins this game.
So it's his third straight time reaching with Arkansas the Sweet 16. So,
and he's doing it without Nick Smith, who has just inexplicably disappeared and played like 12 minutes. And I don't think he scored against Kansas.
But Musselman, it's fascinating to me how the good coaches know when to take the guys out that are your horses.
Yeah, it's something to follow only because I know post-game that Nick Smith threw a big fit and went into the shower and cried after the game and threw things even after they won, disappointed that he didn't play, and he's been taken out of the rotation. Now, Eric Musselman's a good enough coach and smart enough to know what to tweak and what to do in these situations, so he's done that. But that's, again, just watch. That can really tear a team apart. It may not matter with Arkansas, but if Nick Smith, who is this great lottery pick type talent, is taken away and he's unhappy with his role and can't get going with the team, maybe that's something that could affect Arkansas.
Yeah, hit us up with your thoughts at Outkick 360. In regards to Arkansas, last year they take down Gonzaga. This year they take down Kansas. And, on their way to 3 straight Elite Eights. Under 500 in SEC play. And now we're seeing this version of the Razorbacks with 2 lottery picks coming up in the NBA draft, most likely.
Just a quick PSA, because everyone's going to talk about, well, this conference sucked and they're overrated, and this conference great because they have more teams in Sweet 16.
On results.
I wouldn't go that far. It does tell you something. I'm not saying to discount NCAA tournament results, obviously. But let's not go too far. We won't on this show. Let's not go too far with the Big Ten sucks because they got one team in. And I think what it shows you more than anything is style. I'll give you an example. The ACC was soft this year. The ACC was not very good. We knew that by the amount of teams in the tournament and the seeding they got there. And I think the Tennessee-Duke situation showed that. The SEC is hard. They play physical. They have athletes. They get after you. I think we saw some of that with Arkansas, with Alabama, with Tennessee over the weekend. Now, again, I'm talking about contrasting styles. I'm not saying the Big Ten was a terrible league this year. They weren't. Maybe the Pac-12 was, in hindsight. But it's not just the equivalent of, well, they got put out in the first 2 rounds. That conference must have been bad all year. It's not that simple. But with the Big Ten, I think they're a good conference. I think they're not as good as the SEC this year, but they're always going to be right there. A lot of talk about, will the NCAA selection committee finally admit their mistake and stop putting so many Big Ten teams in? I don't think that outcome in the tournament will ultimately determine that, as much as who you play during the regular season, what you look like.
Chad, Penny Hardaway, he's not pleased with how Memphis bowed out in this tournament. I thought the Tigers had the talent and, quite frankly, the coach to make a run with how he had this team playing against Houston most recently. And instead, Florida Atlantic, they go toe-to-toe, and Hardaway's seen throwing the water bottle at the end of the game, tossing it forward, and they're moving on to the off-season where, again, Hardaway trying to meet expectations of the Memphis lore that he left whenever he went to the NBA. He's brought it back to this point, but it's not as far along as I thought it would be in 2023.
Let's show the photo, the still shot of that water bottle toss one more time. And let me give a little advice to Penny Hardaway, who was a professional athlete at the highest realm of the sport at one point. The man had Chris Rock cutting commercials for him as Lil Penny at one point in his career.
Yeah.
This looks like Tom Cruise in the first Top Gun when some production assistant had to explain to him how to throw his dog tags off of the aircraft carrier. That's what it looks like. It looked like someone had to show Penny Hardaway how to throw a water bottle. If we could show it in real time in the actual video, you would see that my only thing I can say about Penny is maybe it was so full that it caused, or the weight was off balance, that it caused his wrist to go back in a certain way that made it look like he didn't know how to throw something. The other thing is maybe he got halfway into a huge water bottle chuck and said, there's civilians over there. I probably shouldn't throw this thing as hard as I want to. And maybe he showed a little bit of restraint and some good judgment and just barely tossing it. But that was the weakest water bottle throw for a guy that angry that I've ever seen. We saw Tom Izzo break the clipboard at one point. That was a baller move by Izzo, Mr. March. This was a bad look for Penny Hardaway.
How about the guys getting into it on the bench?
He looked like a pouting baby walking off the court also. Just his facial expression, the way he walked off the court. I give guys some grace when you lose in dramatic fashion like this, the way they did. By the way, we're really close to a Rick Barnes, Penny Hardaway Sweet 16 showdown. Had they not lost virtually at the buzzer against Florida Atlantic in that game, they would have beaten Fairleigh Dickinson in round 2 also. The fight on the bench was nuts. I'm watching that game live.
You don't see that.
It's one of those where I feel like certain times you're watching a big sporting event live and you go to social media, but you feel like you're the only one watching a certain game. I felt like at that hour, I was the only one watching it because no one was talking about two Memphis guys just brawling on the bench. And Kendrick Davis came to the sideline and went after Malcolm Dandridge. Yeah. And the sideline reporter said this was like a 90-second standoff. Like what you saw on camera, it did not end there. They had to be separated. And Penny Hardaway barely said anything to either guy and didn't step up.
I think that's...
It speaks to their culture.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of the routine with what they've done there. Dandridge has been there a while, too.
It speaks to their culture, and I don't say that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Quite frankly.
And so does the water bottle toss.
You cannot, in any game, but especially in the NCAA tournament, with I think there were 3 minutes left in the game at that point, have your star player and your most veteran guy down low get into a shoving match and shouting match that way and not have someone diffuse it. You got to have an assistant take the guy who's being completely out of control to the locker room for a minute to cool down and come back out. You got to do something to stop that. That cannot happen in that moment. I think it showed a lack of maturity with Memphis. I think the Penny Hardaway water bottle toss showed a big-time lack of maturity. We've seen it with Penny Hardaway for a while. It's funny how these things and these critiques go away when a guy wins, and he's won more this year.
Yeah.
Great job bringing in SMU transfer Kendrick Davis, who was one of the leading scorers in the country. But when things got tough for Penny Hardaway, he showed his true side again. And I'm not a Penny Hardaway hater, but he's shown this bit of immaturity,
it is that chip
petulant
on the shoulder
child-type mentality.
But that's kind of that's the vibe of the entire program, right? Like the chip on the shoulder, us against everyone mentality. Like build the fence around Memphis and everyone with us is with us. And if you're not in, we're coming for you. And, they want to make this a fight. And the way they get after it in practice, I'm sure things have gone down a lot worse. And, again, what we saw, and Chad, I'm with you, what I saw was a way bigger deal than what it was made in the moment, especially the timing of the game. And you don't see it at this point, right? You may see it in a conference game in early January. You don't see it in March like this. And ultimately, that's their demise early in the tournament.
Well, and you don't see it in March because typically coaches have a better handle on their guys and their program than what we saw with Penny Hardaway.
But even if you have the 2 5-stars and the lottery pick against the guy who's the up-and-comer, you still don't see that. And if it does happen, it happens behind the scenes, not on the bench, in prime time against a team that you should be beating, especially after the way they played against Houston a week ago. At Outkick 360 is where you can find us. Stephen Pitino is going to join us. He's the attorney for Kai Spears. The New York Times, with the report last week, that was instantly denied by 4 different people or personnel within the athletic department by the University of Alabama. And Kai Spears, according to the New York Times, and they're standing by their reporter, allegedly is in the passenger seat with Brandon Miller, who brought the weapon to the scene of a murder, where 2 others, including a former Bama player, is charged with capital murder. And the Spears family, the attorney, Spears himself, and the university are all saying he wasn't there and they can prove it. His attorney joins us next, and we'll ask him how they plan on doing so and why they haven't done it yet. This is Outkick 360.
Arizona gives Corbin Carroll, 22-year-old Corbin Carroll, he of all 115 Major League plate appearances, a 8-year, $111 million deal. All guaranteed. Club has, I think, a 9th-year option for $23 million or something like that. But and Bill, we were talking earlier. This is the fusion, or this is where old school baseball and sabermetrics meet, and I think they butt heads. Because in my mind, this is sabermetricians saying, okay, all of his other numbers, all of his underlying numbers from college and the minor leagues tell us that he's going to be this $100 million player, so we're going to save some money and sign him. Whereas the old school guys would be like, hey, you know what? Give me a year or two of production, and then we'll take care of you. I just think that there's I mean, obviously as a player, who wouldn't love it? But as a team, no chance. No chance, given the physical nature of the game, given the challenge of the schedule, and the human factor. I mean, how is he going to handle a slump in the big leagues? How's he going to handle the 14-day East Coast road trips? I mean, there's just so many things. I believe I mean, this is one of those guys that almost, I feel like Chipper Jones or Alex Rodriguez, when you see him, you know, he's a can't miss. And I believe he is, but I don't believe to the tune of $111 million. So, I mean, I'm curious, as a fan of a team, is this something that excites you or something that worries you?
It worries me a great deal because, as you're saying, and it doesn't matter to me what the GM was thinking, but basically he's saying, I know this kid's going to be great.
Right.
And if all of a sudden he levels off and is a 240 hitter who's stealing a couple bases and doesn't have major league power, you're stuck with $111 million over the next 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a very, I don't want to say very common, but you're seeing this over the last 5 years more than you've ever seen it in the history of the game combined. It just never happened. I mean, you know, guys like Soto and you know, Machado and all these young guys who got good deals young or bigger deals young. I don't know. I mean, listen, it's not my money. So as a fan, you shouldn't care. Although, is this a guy? I think the answer is yes. This is a centerpiece, right? This is a guy that you plan to have in the middle of your lineup, in the middle of your defense. Obviously, I'm assuming he's going to bring some stuff in the clubhouse as well. But this is a sign of modern baseball, for all it's worth, for whatever you want to take that for. It's a different game.
The other thing, Kurt, that you said, and you've said this in earlier podcasts, but this is the first time these kids are on fields where they're not the best player on the field.
Right.
Everybody else is as good as you.
Right.
Well,
and this is a contract where the Diamondbacks are saying this kid will continue to be the best player on the field. Right. And I guess if you're looking for the 5-tool guy, this is it, right? I mean, you're talking about a 25 homer, 300 hitting, 400 on base percentage, 50 steal, Gold Glove caliber, you know. And if that's the player, which, you know, God bless him if he is, if that's the player, then it turns out to be a great deal.
From 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine, Outkick 360 rolls on. So, I really enjoyed Charles Barkley this weekend, Chad. I know we had the discussion last week about, the TNT crossover with CBS, and if not for TNT coming in and helping out with the monetary adjustment that was needed to keep the tournament, I think we would see this tournament through ESPN. And TNT came in and split this with CBS, and now we see more of Barkley, but then also others, which is a bit overkill with all the different studios and the consistency of it. But I think Barkley has seen quite a bit of some of these teams because we've seen quite a bit of the SEC and the Big Ten represented through the first 2 weeks, and plenty of storylines with that. It's not hard for him to watch a game and think, man, here's what happened. Here's how Princeton dominated the boards against Missouri, because he's probably seen Missouri against Auburn.
Well, I think the way they use him too, and this is, look, I love Charles Barkley, so I'm never going to be upset when he's a part of anything. But we posed the question about, is it right to bring in people that don't watch college basketball as much? I think it's right for this reason. They do it properly. They don't try to make Charles Barkley an expert on the 8th guy off the bench for Creighton. They joke about their lack of knowledge of some of these teams, but they're so good at just watching the games and seeing what's going on in the games while doing a little bit of research that it comes across as very genuine and good because they can react to what's happening on the court. Charles Barkley's done a great job throughout this tournament for that reason.
The New York Times is standing by their report that Kai Spears was in the vehicle with Brandon Miller on the very early morning of January 15th, where the weapon was returned to the scene in Tuscaloosa that ended up being a scene where a young woman lost her life. And 2 are charged with capital murder. Brandon Miller continues to play, and Kai Spears is in the news as of last week, despite the very swift and quick denial from multiple people involved with Spears, including himself, his father, the university, who says there was no other student athlete there whatsoever, and his attorney, Stephen Pitino, who says he has definitive evidence to prove all this. Thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it, Stephen. How are things?
Things are well. Thank you guys for having me on.
So you can demonstrate how you know and can prove he was not there with Brandon Miller. Why haven't we seen this yet?
My initial plan was to release that in litigation if it got to litigation. I was finally contacted today by an assistant general counsel for the New York Times concerning this matter. But what I can tell you is Kai Spears was back at Bryant Hall in his dorm room at the time of the incident in question with someone, a friend of his who was spending the night. He had been out on the strip the earlier part of the evening following the win over LSU. So to those people who say, well, was Kai out or what have you? Yes, he had been out. He had gone to dinner. He had gone on the strip, but he was back in Bryant Hall at the time of the incident in question. We have alibis. We have his phone. And in addition, let me find the gentleman's name. My apologies. A witness in our case will be Tuscaloosa Deputy Chief Sanders Severn, who has agreed to be a witness in our case if it gets to that point, indicating that Kai, along with other members of the Alabama basketball team, were questioned, released, and the police had definitively cleared Kai as having been present on the scene in the car or having anything whatsoever to do with this tragedy.
So he is. Are you saying? And again, I'm reading into this. Are you saying he was with Brandon Miller at some point that evening, and he did not return to that spot specifically when Miller did, or he just wasn't there when the incident took place?
I don't know who he was with, so I don't know if Brandon Miller was at dinner where Kai had dinner. So don't hold me to who was part of Kai Spears and his friend's dinner party or anything like that.
No, no doubt. I'm just trying to piece the timeline together. So what is so definitive from the New York Times standpoint on this, where not just one or two statements have been released on this, but several on behalf of Kai that he wasn't there, including himself, but specifically you, the university says that not only was he not there, no other student athlete was there to their knowledge, and also, of course, his father. What's the report leading you towards that's so definitive for the New York Times to say, you know what, we stand by this?
From what my understanding, and I don't know it for sure, I think they wanted to get some kind of a jump the day before March Madness. They wanted clicks. They wanted to shine some light on this. The reporter wanted some shine, some recognition, some notoriety. He did not have and does not have, cannot prove that Kai was in that car. The only thing that he has is some supposed anonymous source that places Kai Spears in the car. We know for a fact, has been confirmed by the Tuscaloosa police force, that Kai Spears was not, in fact, on the scene in the car or anywhere near the incident.
So I'm no attorney. I don't claim to be. What would stop, because we do know from the police report that there is an unnamed person in Brandon Miller's car that night when the incident takes place. What's to stop Alabama, the police, anyone from saying who that person is that would, by your account, clear your attorney's name if they named who the person was?
Well, I mean, that's for, number one, it's still an ongoing criminal investigation. So maybe they need to keep that individual's identity concealed for the purposes of the ongoing investigation. I don't do criminal defense work. I'm typically a personal injury and wrongful death lawyer. But thinking about it from the standpoint of what might law enforcement be thinking, they may just be treating this as an ongoing investigation. I know that the University of Alabama's athletic department has said this is an ongoing investigation. We're continuing to cooperate. So I think it may just be a situation where it's a little bit premature. And then Alabama also has some privacy concerns. There is such a thing as FERPA, the Federal Education Records Protection Act. So I also don't do higher education law aside from Title IX from here and there. But those could be some of the motivations for either the University of Alabama or law enforcement not releasing the identity of the supposed fourth student athlete.
Yeah, I know you just talked with the co-counsel for the New York Times, so I'm not going to get into that specific conversation, but just in general, what constitutes libel? If legal action was taken, what constitutes libel on the New York Times side?
It is the publishing of a knowingly false statement. And it's more than just libel here, but also there are other causes of action like false light, invasion of privacy, and some other things that come to mind that the New York Times would not have First Amendment protections for. So it is the widespread publication of a known falsehood. And the only defense to that is truth. So unless the New York Times can prove that what the reporter reported was the truth, then the New York Times is liable.
If they issued a retraction, if they came back after you and all sides of this, from the Alabama side to Kai Spears' father at Marshall, and everyone said he absolutely unequivocally was not there. If the New York Times came back and said, we retract this previous report, does that leave them more open to a lawsuit or less open to a lawsuit at that point if they come back with a retraction?
Well, it's part of what has already been, and within just a couple of hours of this report coming out, the non-monetary aspects of what would help this entire situation. If the New York Times would issue an apology, a retraction, a correction of the story, but that's not the way this has gone. I spoke with this Mr. Witz on Thursday, and Witz doubled down and victim blamed. Witz actually said, well, then why did Kai Spears not tell me where he was? He didn't have any obligation to talk to you, New York Times reporter. He was doing what his athletic department asked him to do, which was to just offer a no comment, as did Christian Spears when the New York Times reached out to Marshall's SID.
It's a back and forth. And that evening, it was early morning last week, whenever they came back and doubled back on the story and backed their reporter, I knew we were headed down a path of certainly a lawsuit, but beyond that, if Spears is seeking damages for defamatory comments, can you give us the timeline on that, and what are you seeking?
Well, there are damages. What I can tell you right now, without divulging too much, is that ever since this story broke, Kai has been the subject of threats. He's obviously having to talk to people, to counselors, things like that. And think about that for just a second. I have a 20-year-old college sophomore, my beloved daughter at the University of Kentucky. As the father of a college student, Kai Spears is 18 years old. He's a kid. And he walked on at Alabama, and he earned a spot on a very good college basketball team. He should be having the time of his life right now, a magical run through the NCAA tournament. And he has this hanging over him. And for the sake of a couple 100,000 clicks and a couple 100,000 views, Kai Spears was connected with a murder. And as we say in the legal field, you can't unring a bell. You can't cause people to unhear what they've heard. So that's just a very brief thumbnail sketch of the types of damages that we're going to be seeking in this case.
I know that sources are protected legally in a lot of ways with reporting, but is there anything with a lawsuit or anything that would compel the New York Times or this reporter to turn over via a lawsuit how they had this information or where they got this? Is there any part of that where you could find that out in some sort of discovery?
Well, for Mr. Witz, it's going to come down to, pardon me.
Stephen P. New, our guest, he's the attorney for Alabama's Kai Spears.
At a deposition, I would ask Mr. Witz what his source was. And he can either protect that, or we go back to court on a motion to compel discovery, and a federal judge is going to have to make a decision at that point as to whether or not to protect that source.
If there is no retraction, are you seeking monetary damages?
Even if there is a retraction, we're seeking monetary damages. The retraction and the apology are the non-monetary terms of any resolution of this.
How did their general counsel take that?
I'm waiting to hear back from the general counsel and the deputy general counsel at the New York Times.
What has Alabama been like to deal with, Stephen? They're releasing several statements through either their head coach or their AD. From your stance and the job you're doing, are they easy to work with in this or hard?
Easy to work with.
Well, on behalf of Kai there, I mean, that's good. I guess Brandon Miller could also confirm who was in the car as well. If in fact,
yes.
Is there clear video evidence that it's not Kai? Because we've heard that there's there's a ring camera. There's also some other camera that one of the detectives in the hearing was referencing.
I've not seen any video, so I don't want to comment on the video. I just know that Deputy Chief Severn, in what he viewed and up to the point where he spoke with Kai, was clear that Kai wasn't in the car, present on the scene. Now, whether Detective Severn's opinion is based on video evidence, I'm not entirely sure. I haven't seen it yet.
Sorry about that. Is there any chance that the person that was in the car could testify on your behalf and on Kai's behalf in some lawsuit?
Yeah, absolutely. If later it comes out who that supposed fourth person was, yeah, I could very much see that fourth person being identified and then coming forth and saying, yeah, that was me, not Kai.
Stephen Pitino has been our guest, the attorney for Alabama's Kai Spears, as the saga with all the details over the last 3 or 4 weeks now continue to play out in what happened on January 15th. Thank you for the time. We appreciate it. And as things develop, hopefully you'll come back on with us and try to clarify some things.
Sure. I would be happy to. I'll keep you guys up to date. Thank you so much on behalf of Kai and Christian and Dr. Julia Spears. I appreciate you having me on.
Yep, no doubt. Thank you so much. And he put another person on hold for us there.
That's
with
good.
The phone ringing.
Well, very important. It could have been the assistant counsel for the New York Times that he put on hold during that call.
Chad, so here's where I'm confused from the university standpoint, and he's representing his client. But as far as clarification, if Bama knows that there's no other student athlete, they didn't say basketball player, student athlete at the scene, why can't they clarify how they came to that realization, that fact, that to their knowledge that's what was going on with 3 members of the student body and from specifically the athletic program were there from the team. Why can't they clarify who was in the car with Brandon Miller, who they allow to speak to the media on a weekly basis throughout this tournament? I don't understand that aspect of it, or why you can't say, hey, he wasn't there because he was here, and here's how we prove it. And to me, it's that simple. And it's even more telling that the New York Times is backing this story and saying they're standing by the report, and they're just adding quotes in now as an update to the story.
Yeah,
no retraction there.
They're not going to issue a retraction, and this could easily be solved if someone could produce who the passenger was. No one has really fully refuted. I know Mr. New at that one point said, well, if there's another passenger, that person could theoretically testify on our behalf if they were there.
Yeah, right.
And I keep thinking everyone else in this case has been named. Brandon Miller, who's not being charged with the crime, was named by the police officer. Everybody had. Jaden Bradley has been named as someone that was there, but yet we still have this unnamed passenger in the car.
Yeah, and that's
in the front seat of the car.
Unnamed even during the original hearing.
And I'm thinking, was the passenger not 18? What is the protection that this unnamed passenger would get that's not being charged with a crime, by the way, that Brandon Miller wouldn't get, who's not being charged by a crime, that Jaden Bradley wouldn't get, that every other principal of this case that has been named by police officers, they're not getting that protection and not being named. I don't understand how this person remains a mystery.
Especially considering where we are now compared to where we were at the end of last week with this, right?
Right.
And you've got Glenn Gilbo's going up and discussing things with Billy Pitts, who's got the story for the New York Times. But beyond that, the 4 different statements made by Alabama, but still no just definitive evidence that says, yeah, here it is. Is TMZ going to get this video?
And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but he didn't say that he was never in the car.
That's what I was clarifying.
That night, he was out at one point.
He can't say that he wasn't with Brandon Miller. He just knows based on
he wasn't there at the time.
Cell phone data that he was not there at the time the incident went down. That's why I wanted to clarify if he was in the car to begin with, arriving and then left because he wasn't there when the incident took place. That doesn't mean you didn't drive there with Brandon Miller. But he said he was not there at the time to arrive in the car with Brandon Miller when Miller returned.
I want to go back and read the full New York Times report now, and I wonder if we're dealing with some bit of semantics where they may have protected themselves by saying this was the passenger in the car with Brandon Miller but wasn't there at the scene? Because they did reference an unnamed passenger. And now maybe the attorney is saying, because not disputing that he was in the car at some point that night, but maybe he was dropped off right before. There's a lot of questions I have that could all be clarified by someone producing the unnamed passenger.
Right.
And the identity of that person.
And as we continue to discuss this, Alabama continues to win. And they're on their way to the Sweet 16.
The story's not going away. I look down on Twitter right now, and there's a story from the Boston Globe about Alabama's complicated run through March going back to the murder case.
Hit us up with your thoughts. Outkick 360 on social, also on YouTube. You can join the chat there in real time. Coming up from Alabama to Arkansas, Musselman and the talent for the Razorbacks, well, it's back. And now he's shirtless. It's next on Outkick 360. Brady recently retiring. Your locker was very close to Tom's locker, wasn't
right next to 12, yeah.
What was that like?
Man, it was cool, man. He's a funny dude, man. He's a nice guy. Joke with him every day. You know, he's a good dude, man. He's probably one of the only dudes that I know that walk around in a bathrobe in the locker room, bro. So
you go up against him in practice all the time. Could you see that big jump coming from Daniel Jones going into this season?
Man, when I first played against Daniel, you know, coming in last year and seeing him work, man, I knew, you know, the talent that he had. It was just one of those things where, you know, you always hear the saying, God's timing is always right. It was just one of those moments where you knew eventually it was going to click and everything was going to work out, not just for him, but for us as a team. And I'm just so happy for him.
Which video game are you most proud of making the cover for?
Oh, definitely Madden. Madden, yeah. Like I remember I come from a big family. My mom had 6 sisters and 1 brother and a lot of cousins, 30-some cousins. And, you know, and I remember one of the younger ones was like, man, you're on Madden. You're really good. And I was like, like, I was the high school #1 player in the country.
Yeah.
I broke every record at Alabama, All-American. I get the pros. I'd won the MVP already. You know?
Yeah.
Been to the Super Bowl, won the MVPs. Like, now, because of Madden, now you're cool. I was like, oh, okay.
You had done a few things.
Yeah. You know, now I'm good. Okay, all right, well, that's how it works in y'all's minds.
And I remember when I first started working the morning news, shout out to Drew Kaliski, super producer for NFL Today. He was just talking about season. How you feeling? You know, you ready to go? Are you excited? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like awkwardly hesitating to ask me a question. And I'm like, what's up, man? Speak your piece. And he's like, do you know what's going on in the NFL? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, do you know who plays for what teams and who's been traded where? I'm like, yeah, bro, what do you think? I'm living under a rock? And this is my job. I'm studying just like anything else.
How much fun are you having staying attached to the game and being able to talk about it weekly?
It is beautiful for me. I enjoy football. I enjoy our family at NBC, and we get to cover some great games. But to do different projects, you know, I got to go to Jacksonville and interview Doug Peterson for the game and talk about his impact of what he's done, not only for the team, but in the city of Jacksonville. Those are the kind of special things. I got to go to Buffalo and cover a game up there and actually did a chapel service for the Bills before the game. And I got to meet DeMar Hamlin and some of those guys, and that have become kind of in the forefront of things since that incident on Monday night.
Now it's almost like the SEC and everybody else. And so if you end up going to the Big 12, it's like, oh, well, you may not have gotten an offer from a SEC school. You go to Pac-12, and it's like, well, you're going to get lost out there. So it's just tough with the competition, but we got to bring some recruits in.
You were a Big East guy. You
Yeah.
played in the Big East. Do you like the move to the ACC for Syracuse? It's been a while now, but did you like it at the time? What do you think now?
I'm on the board of trustees, and I'm a alum. I'm a alum from that. Now I'm retired, but it was a decision I helped make. But I just always thought it was going to be tough moving to the ACC and competing in all of our sports.
Can a running back today in the league win MVP?
They would have to score a lot of touchdowns. Yeah. I think that's the thing. Like, you know, like the yards are starting to get taken for granted a little bit, you know, and so you got to need yards and touchdowns. And, you know, Adrian's done it, LaDainian, and then I think you got to go back to like Marshall and Emmett, right?
Yeah, So, you know,
so it's a big gap now. And, you know, I think that you have to have the touchdowns and yards both to get it.
Coming up in about 10 minutes, Andrew Brandt will join us from the front office of the Green Bay Packers. He's also been an agent, now a media member, and doing great things, providing clarity, Chad. At least we'll try to, with Andrew Brandt on Aaron Rodgers.
We're doing a lot of that
Packers,
today with our lawyer that joined
Jets.
us. Got to really provide some clarity today. That's always helpful.
So you said that Angie was...
That's a good name for a show, by the way.
What, Providing Clarity?
Providing Clarity.
You said
I would listen to that podcast, Providing Clarity with Hutton and Withrow.
And you're saying that Angie was very clear on her stance with Musselman.
Could be a future podcast name. Yeah, and I'm getting blown up because she was listening to the show and said, "Oh, no, you made me look bad by saying I didn't like it." And I'm thinking,
I didn't think that.
No, I said you are like the majority of non-Arkansas fans. I think most people that I saw on social media didn't like it. So she's in the camp with most people out there. I don't care. I like the enthusiasm. I thought it was a little weird, for a 58-year-old head coach to tear his shirt off in that moment.
Yeah.
But that's also authentic to who he is. So I had no big issue with it. But I think a lot of people probably didn't love it.
But look at Musselman. I mean, he shaved his chest knowing that he was going to do this ahead of time.
Or maybe he just has no chest hair. There are people with no chest hair, Hud, like me. I just naturally don't have any chest hair.
Wow.
That's actually a thing that's out there. Yeah.
Wow.
Not a lot of arm hair either.
What else do you and Musselman have in common?
It's not a hairy guy. I too like to take off my shirt in celebration at times. I never coached in the NBA, so we don't have that going for us.
You know who he reminds me of?
I'm much taller than he is.
Dan Campbell. There's a Dan Campbell-esque quality to Eric Musselman here, where I don't know if it carries over to the fan base, but the energy for sure would carry over to the locker room. And I believe he was on with Jeff Goodman. Musselman told Jeff Goodman, he's like, a week before the SEC tournament, I came in and told my guys, like, hey, if we have the chance to make a run. Record's not where we want it. We're starting to come together right now. If you go the proper route going into the SEC tournament, we can have some momentum and ride it all the way to a Sweet 16 or an Elite 8. And here they are. And I think this is more about, and Kansas was banged up. They didn't have Bill Self, of course, too. I think this is more about the 1 seeds being closer to the middle of the pack than we've seen in recent years. Maybe I'm way off there. But when a 16's beating a 1 and another 15 seed is in the Sweet 16 for the 3rd consecutive year, to me, the talent gap is closing. And I think in large part because we're seeing more of a senior-esque roster due to the extra COVID year or the portal. I think that all plays a factor, and I think we've seen it about as even as we've ever seen it to this point. And we saw that through the top 25, the top 10 all year with the AP rankings. Arkansas is a great example.
I think this is the year where the most teams have a chance to win it all going into it that I can remember in quite some time. But I say that knowing that Alabama still looks like they are leaps and bounds better than everyone else. So I want to see Alabama at least challenged before really buying into that. But I think you're right. It's not as much as, boy, the 16 seeds this year are so much better. Fairleigh Dickinson was not a good team all year. They did not win their conference. They should not have been able to do this. I think it's more a byproduct of, like you said, the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s are really more like 7, 8, 9, 10s, 11s this year when you look at it, because there's just not a big difference between those teams and some of the teams in the middle of the bracket. And if you're looking, so now if I flip it and say a 16 seed beat a 9 or 10 seed, that's not shocking. You know, you could see that happening where there's a 6 or 7 difference in the seed line, right? That's where I think we are right now. Those 1s and 2 seeds just aren't as good as they've been in the years past.
And from a matchup standpoint, San Diego State and Bama, when Bama has lost this year, Chad, it's been to the more physical team. If you take it to them, you know, we saw that from Tennessee. Arkansas is a good example, too. If you take it to them, they're going to struggle more than what you would expect on a nightly basis. That doesn't mean they're losing, but that gives you a chance. And San Diego State, they want it to be sloppy. I don't know if they can slow them down, but, I mean, they're known for defense. We saw that with A&M, Tennessee. The more physical opponent beat Bama. I don't know if you can do that now because they're winning either way. If Miller even, you know, is a goose egg on the scoreboard sheet.
I'm really interested to see those teams that like to, as Tennessee put it, bring you into the mud.
Yeah.
How they do now moving forward. San Diego State, Houston, Tennessee. I'm looking at those 3 teams because those are the more of the bully ball type teams in terms of how they defend and how they value defense during the game. And these teams we're going to see now go against some great offensive teams.
Houston.
They're going to put up a ton of threes and put up a ton of points. How can these teams that really hang their hat on defense withstand some of these offenses?
Sasser and Shed went out for an extended period of time for Houston, and then they took the lead from there. They actually gained momentum with those guys on the bench. That's a scary sight
Sasser
for anyone.
being back completely changes my mind on Houston.
Yeah.
I thought they were dead. I thought Auburn would beat them. They were down 10 at halftime, but then Marcus Sasser looks like Marcus Sasser all year. Had the groin pull in the semifinal of the AAC tournament, didn't play against Memphis, came out early in their first round win, looked a little shaky early on, but then turned it on for Houston in this game. That is now a team that could win it all. If he's fully healthy, they can win it all.
I want a recording of whatever Kelvin Sampson said at halftime because Auburn had 41 points in the first half. In the second half, defensively, Houston held them to 16% shooting and 23 points.
I think a lot of that, too, is Auburn not a great shooting team this year, not a great offensive team. I think they reverted to the mean as much as Houston turned it up. And they did. They turned it up. Credit to them. But I think a lot of it, Auburn wasn't going to continue at that clip forever.
The Aaron Rodgers decision and the trade. Andrew Brandt joins us next on Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey, authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation, and pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader. I am going to continue to argue
that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life. ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really gotta lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the #1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Old Taste of a Southern Legend.
Glad you're with us across the Outkick Network. Hutton and Withrow here. Yeehaw Beer, Old Smoky Moonshine. Our studios here at 6th and Peabody. Get back into the college basketball discussion and more thoughts and analysis and some reaction to what we saw post-game on the losing end of some of these teams. We switch gears, though, first as we kick off the final hour. At some point, there's a deadline. At least I think so. Andrew Brandt joins us from the front office of the Packers. He's, of course, been an agent as well, and he knows Aaron Rodgers and what this saga is like from the Packers' perspective, having lived it with Brett Favre. Andrew, thanks so much, and really appreciate you coming back on the show.
Yeah, good to be with you guys. You brought it up, and even you bring it up then, I just get these, not bad, but just kind of this eerie memories, because it's just amazing how symmetrical this is playing out. As you mentioned, 15 years ago, we pivoted from a Hall of Fame quarterback named Brett Favre to a former first-round pick who'd been sitting in the bullpen for 3 years, named Aaron Rodgers. Now Rodgers is in the role of Favre. Jordan Love is in the role of Rodgers. And it's happening exactly the same way. 3 years as an apprentice, 3 years where Brett sat with Aaron, his replacement, for 3 years. Aaron sat with Jordan, his replacement, for 3 years. And lo and behold, both are, we think, being traded to the New York Jets. It's kind of uncanny. It's eerie.
And you touched on that in your Sunday 7 newsletter this week, which you can subscribe to, anyone listening or watching, andrew-brandt.com. Absolutely free. Also on Instagram, Andrew Brandt 2. One of your sayings, there's always deadlines. Deadlines produce action. Where is the deadline in your mind for this deal getting done?
You know, one thing that hasn't been talked about enough is this contract that Aaron Rodgers signed last year, where there's an option, and that makes it sound like the Packers have a decision to make. The problem is the option doesn't have an exercise date until the start of the season. Well, theoretically, you can exercise the option now and any moment till September, but you don't have to. So without that, we really don't have a deadline. The only deadline that I can think of that's anywhere near now is the draft, because theoretically the Packers want picks from the 2023 draft. But to try to make a deadline in March, in early April, it's hard for me to come up with one, guys, because what do they lose by sitting on their heels? No one's in the building. There's no practices. Aaron's not hanging around the Packers waiting to be traded. Aaron's in California. So there really isn't. But at some point, I do think the Packers have a little more bargaining position than the Jets.
Yeah, and look, I argued that it's even more than a little more, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Andrew, because when Aaron Rodgers comes out of his isolation retreat and says, not only do I want to play, but I want to play for the New York Jets and I want to be traded, and the Jets have done all these things to appease Aaron Rodgers and build a roster around him, isn't all the pressure on the Jets to make this happen? There's no real plan B. If you're the Packers, you know what you are right now. You know you're going to be breaking in Jordan Love. You know, everything's sort of stable because they're going under the assumption they won't have Aaron Rodgers. Everything relies on Aaron Rodgers for the Jets. So doesn't that put all the pressure on the Jets in this situation?
I think so. I mean, I said this right after the Pat McAfee interview. And I guess I, among others, started this whole debate that we're talking about right now over the past week. I think so. I think the Packers have extraordinary leverage here. You mentioned some of it. What you didn't emphasize enough is they flew the owner's brother, the general manager, the head coach, the assistant coach, the cap person on a private plane 4 or 5 hours to appease, beg, plead, implore Aaron Rodgers to be their next quarterback. He says publicly in front of 400,000 people on a video, I'm in. That's my intention. So now, okay, they go sign, as you said, Alan Lazard, who has a press conference saying, I look forward to playing with Brett Favre. I mean, I'm sorry, Aaron Rodgers, God, sorry. I'm like, whoa, do they know what Alan Lazard just said? I mean, listen, I don't see any way for the Jets to bluff this. What are they going to say? If we go to the draft, we're going to take a rookie. We're going to trade for Ryan Tannehill. I don't see it. So I do think anytime soon the Packers have leverage. Now, people say arguments that I just don't get about the Jets having leverage. The argument is, well, Aaron's going to show up at the Packers camp. No, he's not. He's not. Okay, he's just not. Or they're going to have to pay Aaron $60 million in September. This is never going to get to September. This is never going to get to September. I just don't think the Jets are going away. I don't think they're going away tomorrow. I don't think they're going away next week. I don't think they're going away before the draft, after the draft. Because what are their options? As you said, the Packers have their quarterback. He's been sitting in their building for 3 years. The Jets have Zach Wilson. Enough said. Baker Mayfield signed. Derek Carr signed. Jimmy Garoppolo signed. I don't see it.
Andrew Brandt with us on Outkick 360. What led to the Favre breakup? And is it maybe not identical, maybe it is. how similar is it to what you've seen from the 30,000-foot view and what you know of the organization and how things went down then compared to now with Rodgers?
I can say this as someone that obviously was around Brett a long time, but don't know the exact message given to Brett. But there were years, as everyone knows who was around back then, where we, the Packers front office, would beg. We'd go down to Mississippi. Please come back another year. Please come back, making sure you're coming back another year. But after 2007, we didn't beg. We said, hey, Brett, let us know. Pretty much that's it. Let us know. And please let us know by free agency. And of course, he retired, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I never got this from him, but I feel like he got the message, we kind of want you to retire and move on to Rodgers. And it was exactly like Aaron was talking on McAfee the other day, where he said, yeah, I come out of the darkness, I find they're shopping me. So past years, begging him to come back, giving him a big contract to come back this year, yeah, whatever. We'll see. So there's a lot of parallel there. Of course, Aaron is not retiring, even though he went into the darkness saying he was, but now he's not. So that makes it a little bit different.
Andrew Brandt with us. What's your best guess of what happens and when?
Well, let's talk about the what before the when. I think the what, there's a second half to this trade, guys, that I think is pretty easy and maybe even done, right? The second half to the trade is a 2024 draft pick that stair steps from, say, fourth round to third round to second round to even first round, depending on Aaron's performance in 2023. That's easy to do, right? Playtime, performance, statistical categories, honors, Super Bowl, all those things. That's the easy part of the trade. The hard part is, what do the Packers get back in 2023 draft? Because I think they're asking for, I don't know, a 1+, and they're not being offered a 1. That's just my guess. So that's the tricky part. In terms of the when, there's not a deadline, but there's an opportunity next week. The owners' meetings, Joe Douglas will be there. Brian Gutekunst will be there. Woody Johnson will be there. Mark Murphy will be there. That's a chance. That's a real chance. So if it doesn't happen next week, I think we're looking at kind of the week of the draft.
From the Jets' perspective, is there an ideal time to make this work? Not necessarily for the deal to come together, but for their purposes. Are you sitting there getting antsy at some point this offseason if it's not done?
Well, you got the fan base, which is frothing at the mouth, right?
Yep, of course.
So, but then, whoever it is, Joe Douglas has to walk down the hall every day and see Nathaniel Hackett and see their head coach and see all their offensive coaches trying to game plan for 2023. I got to think they're preparing for Rodgers. I got to think everybody in the building is preparing for Rodgers to be their quarterback. And they're letting Joe Douglas negotiate. So I think they're leaving him alone. I mean, that's the way front offices work. You're not going to leverage him. But they are preparing for Rodgers. I mean, the Allen Lazard thing was kind of obvious. Yeah, they're preparing for Aaron Rodgers to be their quarterback. I will say this, guys. I know I'm partial to the Packers' leverage. The one leverage the Jets have, which may be shocking, is that there's no other suitors. There's no other suitors for Aaron Rodgers. No one. Now, could there be? I don't know. But I think with age and with price, there doesn't seem to be another suitor besides the Jets.
Are you surprised that we haven't seen another suitor yet, at least publicly, for Lamar Jackson, where teams can bid? It doesn't have to be fully guaranteed. The Ravens can match, but we do see a former MVP available, which does not happen in large part. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it twice now because Rodgers is also for the taking via trade to the Jets specifically. But it doesn't have to be the Deshaun Watson deal for a team to make something that's above what Baltimore would do, even if you think Baltimore's going to match. Why haven't we seen more from the NFL perspective? If you're trying to win and turn over every rock, they sure threw in the towel early on this.
It's a mystery why teams stepped up to the mic last week, 2 weeks ago. I just don't get that. It was almost like, again, you've got the union, you've got people like myself saying, what the heck's going on here? Deshaun Watson's contract, you mentioned it. It's the elephant in the room. I've talked about it for a year now. It's the best contract in the history of the league. It's something where we're going to know probably in the next 6 months whether it was just a gust in the wind or a precedent. And if Lamar Jackson is unable to follow it as a precedent, who else is left? Who else is there to sort of make sure Deshaun Watson doesn't die alone as the only fully guaranteed contract out there over 3 years? I'm a little bit dumbfounded by the Lamar Jackson thing, like we all are. I do think, though, when you hear about the Panthers trading at 2 1s and 2 2s and not getting Lamar Jackson, people do have to think about price, right? Mm-hmm. So the Panthers are going to pay whoever it is, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, they're going to pay him less over 4 years than they would pay Lamar Jackson over 1 year. That matters. That matters. So, money does matter to teams, and even a billionaire like in Carolina.
No doubt. Goodell gets the extension. I mean, he gets paid and gets paid well for what he does to protect the Shield. Do you think Goodell wants to leave his legacy as a global brand more than it is just the 32 teams we have right now in the States? And where do you think he hands things off to the new commissioner on this timeline?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I was thinking, just like you were saying, the global side, because you look at what a lot's done. I mean, Goodell, not that he's going to coast the next 7 years, right, but we've got media deals through 2032. We've got a CBA through 2031. So where is he going to spend his energy? Obviously, there's only so many big deals you can do. I think, I want to know what's his top agenda. Of course, they're going to extend him. You look at the value of these franchises. You look at the revenues. We're inching towards $20 billion a year of annual revenues. Of course, they love the work that he's done. And as you said it, he's a shield. He takes the bullets, so they don't have to. So I've seen him in action since he started. I was with the Packers when he was announced as commissioner in 2007. And I remember him taking his visits. We all met him. We knew him because he was an intern and worked at the league so long. We knew all about him. So the real question I want to hear from the owners is, when they do extend him, which they will next week, what are his top priorities? We got CBA and we got media, the two biggest deals. So what's next?
Andrew Brandt, always great with the perspective. And of course, he's got it covered for you in the weekly newsletter, the Sunday 7. You can sign up for the newsletter at his site, absolutely free, andrew-brandt.com. And check him out with the Reels as well on Instagram, at Andrew Brandt 2. We always appreciate the visit. We're smarter for having the chat with you today in regards to Green Bay and beyond. So chances are when the deal's done, it will sound similar to what you just described.
Thanks, guys. Always enjoy being with you.
Yeah,
thank you for providing clarity.
Yeah,
we appreciate that.
Yes.
You got it, guys.
Tough to find nowadays, Chad. Clarity.
He provides it. I'm gonna keep saying it. It sounds good. Rolls right off the tongue. Providing clarity with Andrew Brandt and his newsletter.
So what he's saying there, we certainly saw the teams throwing the towel early on Lamar Jackson. But, okay, maybe it's not Carolina's price. Seattle's paying Geno Smith $53 million in 2023. That's crazy to me, considering what could have happened this offseason with Seattle. And I know Geno had a great year, but haven't you seen the ceiling for Geno Smith? That would be my argument. And I certainly think when he's healthy, Lamar Jackson takes you to a whole different level. I'm not saying he fits everything you do, but, man, if you're trying to win, the dude wins. Same as Jimmy G. It's hard to go against the 45-17 record or whatever it is as a starter.
It's a great mystery. I mean, it really is crazy to think about.
There are other moves to discuss. There was a lot happening this weekend across the National Football League. Signings and a potential great player in the current state right now for his position. a really good safety could be available, and it's over a contract dispute. That's next on Outkick 360.
Arizona gives Corbin Carroll, 22-year-old Corbin Carroll, he of all 115 Major League plate appearances, a 8-year, $111 million deal. All guaranteed. Club has, I think, a 9th-year option for $23 million or something like that. But yeah, and Bill, we were talking earlier. This is the fusion, or this is where old school baseball and sabermetrics meet, and I think they butt heads. Because in my mind, this is sabermetricians saying, okay, all of his other numbers, all of his underlying numbers from college and the minor leagues tell us that he's going to be this $100 million player, so we're going to save some money and sign him. Whereas the old school guys would be like, hey, you know what? Give me a year or two of production, and then we'll take care of you. I just think that there's I mean, obviously as a player, who wouldn't love it? But as a team, no chance. No chance, given the physical nature of the game, given the challenge of the schedule, and the human factor. I mean, how is he going to handle a slump in the big leagues? How's he going to handle the 14-day West Coast, East Coast road trips? I mean, there's just so many things. I believe I mean, this is one of those guys that almost, I feel like Chipper Jones or Alex Rodriguez, when you see him, you know, he's a can't miss. And I believe he is, but I don't believe to the tune of $111 million. So, I mean, I'm curious, as a fan of a team, is this something that excites you or something that worries you?
It worries me a great deal because, as you're saying, and it doesn't matter to me what the GM was thinking, but basically he's saying, I know this kid's going to be great.
Right.
And if all of a sudden he levels off and is a 240 hitter who's stealing a couple bases and doesn't have major league power, you're stuck with $111 million over the next 8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a very, I don't want to say very common, but you're seeing this over the last 5 years more than you've ever seen it in the history of the game combined. It just never happened. I mean, you know, guys like Soto and you know, Machado and all these young guys who got good deals young or bigger deals young. I don't know. I mean, listen, it's not my money. So as a fan, you shouldn't care. Although, is this a guy? I think the answer is yes. This is a centerpiece, right? This is a guy that you plan to have in the middle of your lineup, in the middle of your defense. Obviously, I'm assuming he's going to bring some stuff in the clubhouse as well. But this is a sign of modern baseball, for all it's worth, for whatever you want to take that for. It's a different game.
The other thing, Kurt, that you said, and you've said this in earlier podcasts, but this is the first time these kids are on fields where they're not the best player on the field.
Right.
Everybody else is as good as you.
Right.
Well,
and this is a contract where the Diamondbacks are saying this kid will continue to be the best player on the field. Right. And I guess if you're looking for the 5-tool guy, this is it, right? I mean, you're talking about a 25 homer, 300 hitting, 400 on base percentage, 50 steal, Gold Glove caliber, you know. And if that's the player, which, you know, God bless him if he is, if that's the player, then it turns out to be a great deal.
first phase of free agency wrapped up. You start looking at the guys who are available now compared to where we were a week ago, vastly different. Outkick 360 rolls on. But one of the NFL's top safeties could be available. Reports are that the Titans went to Kevin Byard and said, hey, we need you to take a pay cut. And his agent and him, they responded perfectly. Said, no, we're not going to take a pay cut. We don't want to. We'd love to stay here. But if you don't like us at the number we're playing at currently, we'll go somewhere else. He's the second highest player on the roster currently behind Ryan Tannehill for the biggest cap hit in 2023. And they have been freeing up money. They have the lowest payroll right now for 2023, roster to roster, just comparing that before the draft. A lot can change. But they're definitely freeing up money on the side of the Titans' perspective. And Chad, we've seen him be an All-Pro and a Pro Bowler 2017 and again in 2021. Played well last year too. That would be a signal of a rebuild based on what Byard means to the defense and where he is along his tenure as an NFL player, as a guy that they've drafted out of Middle Tennessee. And he's been a great asset for them on and off the field. And I don't think this was received very well based on all of that. If you want to free up some money, Ryan Tannehill's costing you quite a lot. And you can save $16 million right now, I believe. Maybe it's 18 against the cap by either trading or releasing him.
Well, from Kevin Byard's perspective, he's thinking there are plenty of players you could go to that may not be worth the money you're paying.
Well, they've already cut those guys.
I'm still playing. Yeah, well, he could say I'm still playing at a high level and I'm earning my contract and what you're paying me. And I'm on Kevin Byard's side on this. I don't want to discourage any NFL player from not being a great citizen in their city and not declaring loyalty to their organization and not saying things like, I want to retire on this X team as a Jet, a Lion, a Packer, a Titan, a Jag, a Texan, a Ram, whatever. Wherever you are, if you love it, I want you to be 100% genuine and authentic to who you are and speak truth. But here is where that can get you in trouble. If you appear overly loyal to an organization, they see you sometimes as a mark. And here is a new general manager coming into the Titans and saying, this guy over here who played college football 30 minutes down the road from this team, who was drafted in the mid-rounds, who is a great NFL success story, who has publicly declared his allegiance to the Titans organization and wants to be a lifer with the Titans. That's the guy we go to ask to restructure his contract and take a pay cut, because he is so loyal that he is going to sacrifice his own money to help the club and to help the team and to help the market. Again, I'm not advising someone to not be a good citizen and not be honest and say you want to be there for life. But when you say these things, oftentimes general managers can take that as, even if they're playing at a high level, doesn't really matter. This is a guy that may actually restructure and take a pay cut.
I think the Titans are the most unpredictable team in the draft right now. They pick 11th. They have players that are tradable that will also help them on the cap. You start to look through their roster, there are not many players that are going to get you a chunk of cash free to go out and spend under the cap right now. And Byard's one of them. The other one's Ryan Tannehill. Byard's got around a $18 million cap hit, $19 million cap hit this year. Tannehill, if he stays right now without restructuring, is at 36. I mean, it's a vastly big jump up for Tannehill and his contract details. But I also think you don't want to restructure yet, because you don't want to kick the can down the road on cap hits that you're going to take or willing to absorb now if you can make other moves, which they've done. They are freeing up options. And I don't know if this is a piece to a trade or an idea that, oh, here's a guy that's loyal, so he'll restructure and we'll get a savings. But in either case, it's a signal that they're freeing up money, and they're also going to keep the payroll extremely low. If you want to do that, with a new stadium coming, you need cash on hand. You're putting $700 million in after liquidating some things within the family business. If you're trying to do all that, the way to do that is with a rookie salary at QB, not with the veteran salary that Tannehill's currently making. At least that's how I view it. I'm fascinated to see what happens with Rand Carthon, who comes from San Francisco.
Now, if I'm Kevin Byard and my general manager comes in and says, hey, we want you to take a pay cut because we're ready to cut salary and rebuild, I say, hell no. Do I want to be a part of that? And I'm not doing that. Flip side, if Rand Carthon comes to you and says, we want you to take a pay cut because we're trying to get Lamar Jackson and make all that work to make a run, is your answer different then if you're Kevin Byard?
Possibly, but they've also got to re-sign Jeffrey Simmons.
Yep.
And Byard also knows they just traded A.J. Brown a year ago when he wanted to get paid. And you've got Tannehill and Henry coming up on their final year of deals where you don't owe them anything past 2023.
But that definitely changes the context. If your GM comes to you and says, we're doing this because we want to go try to win a Super Bowl and we're going to try to get Lamar Jackson and we're going to try to sign Jeffrey Simmons and we're going to do some other things. And to do that, we're going to go to you and maybe a couple other guys and try to work this out some way so that we can go big. That's a very different response from me if I'm Kevin Byard, as opposed to, hey, man, we need you to cut some salary because we're going to go full rebuild mode and we're going to go 4-13 this year.
Yeah.
Enjoy making less money to be miserable all autumn and lose most of your games.
Well, it doesn't sound that way because Teron Davenport had the report through ESPN that he has not asked for his release. That was also floated out there, and Teron saying that did not happen. Something to follow because he can
that
be
also
a piece
could be
to
semantics.
Something.
I mean, you could say if you don't like me, you can cut me, and that could be seen as asking for your release, but also just a statement that if I'm so bad, I'm not going to cut it. You know, I'm not cutting my pay. If I'm bad, cut me, and I'll go get a gig somewhere else. That could be seen as asking for your release, or it also could be seen as just saying what you should do as an organization because I'm not taking the pay cut.
Something to follow. I'm also following the Detroit Lions. They're having a solid offseason to pair that with what they did last offseason. C.J. Gardner-Johnson signed with the Lions over the weekend. Chad, they're making moves. The report was out last week that players want to go and play for Dan Campbell. Like there's chatter around the league about trying to get to Detroit, believe it or not. And what he's done versus what was perceived of Dan Campbell at this time last year to this year is a complete 180, at least for me, on what he's done. And they've done a really nice job. They're bringing the coaches back. Young offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson that's working with Jared Goff again this upcoming season. They've loaded up or have a chance to load up even more on the defensive front, depending on what they do in the draft. And offensively, they have pieces that are healthy. Jamison Williams is one of them from Bama who came on at December of last year off the ACL in the national championship game. And I'm looking at as Detroit as one of those teams that may be the media darling come August.
I'm going to surprise you right now. Can we go to church for a second here with what I'm about to tell you? I recently brought up an example of a Sunday school class I was attending about the Sabbath and about resting. Well, now the Sunday school class is about unanswered prayers.
Oh.
Okay, and how you deal with unanswered prayers. You pray for something to happen over and over again.
You pray.
You pray. One of God's greatest gifts are often unanswered prayers. Garth Brooks said that, not the Bible. But when you pray and pray and pray and nothing, it doesn't ever happen. What you're praying for doesn't happen. How you handle that. Okay, I'm going to get to a point here about the Lions. Because I feel like when you go through something, especially if you're a fan or a team, and you lose and you lose and you lose and you lose and eventually you're good, you can only truly be joyous in the moment of being good if you've lived through the awful. But what if you're an organization or a fan that just only sees awful? And then what happens when you don't see the good again? That's what it feels like to be a Lions fan, I think, in many ways right now. But here's the good news for the Lions. And this signing is the latest example. I am a true believer. I believe in Dan Campbell. I believe in the Lions, and I believe that they have established an identity of the type of player they want. And I believe they can win even with Jared Goff as the quarterback. So what has been unanswered prayers for years, I think may finally get answered because they're doing the right things. We may play this back and I look foolish, because they're the Lions again. They don't make the playoffs. But Hutton, I don't think so. I think this is a team that is investing in the right type of player. Dan Campbell has an idea of what they want in that organization.
They have an identity.
They have that identity. They're going to be tough. They're going to be physical. They're getting the guys who love football, all the cliches you could throw out about what every organization says they want. I believe the Lions finally have. I think the prayers from Lions fans are about to be answered.
Really, where it comes down for me, the year with Jamar Chase going to the Bengals, Penei Sewell ends up in Detroit at left tackle. That's where things started to turn. And then they had the gift of Aiden Hutchinson a year ago. So if you start looking at the quality players they're bringing in and the production that guys are getting, their offensive line is one of the very best, if not the best, in the league. Philly's there too. Paired with a defensive front that's getting better because Aiden Hutchinson's a part of it. But if you start going through the depth chart and where they can be after the draft, adding in Gardner Johnson. They have Emmanuel Mosley there now. Jeff Okudah, one of the top prospects from a couple seasons ago. They signed Cam Sutton from Pittsburgh. Perfect fit for the type of mentality and tone that comes across with Dan Campbell. They've got options, and they can go get the best player available in the draft. It's been a while since you've said that.
It's been a long time.
As a football fan.
Since the Lions were a best available player type team, it's been a while.
Yeah. The Texans, also really bad. They have agreed to a record-setting extension for Laramie Tunsil. He, at one point, was the highest paid. He's the highest paid again. He's the most recent offensive lineman playing left tackle to sign. $25 million per year, highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. They trade Brandon Cooks to Dallas, and while they don't get him in return, they've signed now Dalton Schultz. Great tight end for Dallas over the last couple of seasons. Their franchise tag player last season. They chose not to do it this year. Could not get a deal done. Many thought that Schultz was asking way too much. He ends up, and I'll pull the report here 1 second. Dalton Schultz, no details on the contract yet based on this tweet. Jordan Schultz is the guy breaking the news here. So he's now signing in Houston. So from Dallas to Houston. 198 catches for 17 touchdowns over 3 years in Dallas.
Did you ever think, going back to the Laramie Tunsil signing, that night that the gas mask photo was released, that he'd be the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL one day?
No. And, I mean,
what a story of overcoming adversity.
And he's been good.
Well, yeah. He's been very good. He's now the highest paid lineman in the NFL.
Well, part of that is you're able to.
You're the next guy up.
Yeah. But he's done it multiple times now. And even some people thought that the details with Tunsil coming out in the draft is a bad pick for Miami. It's not the case. Dalton Schultz, we're seeing a lot of one-year deals today. 1 year up to $9 million. So the base will be somewhere around probably $7 million, I'd guess. So he doesn't get the contract he thought he was going to get. He's betting on himself with Houston and a rookie quarterback that's coming in.
It's yeah, I don't love it. If I'm Dalton Schultz, I felt like he was going to get better than that.
Yeah. I mean, you have to produce and hit the free agent wire again and hope you don't get tagged. Adam Thielen's in Carolina. Odell Beckham Jr., he wants to get paid. He's not going to get that type of money. And the reports were 15 to 20 million in 2023. Way too many wide receivers available right now. And if I'm a team, I'm not going to sign Odell Beckham Jr. whenever I can wait on the NFL draft and see what happens there and see where my roster is after that.
I think the assumption is it won't happen until after the draft either way.
And he said that he hasn't demanded that type of contract. He's trying to clarify that now, but that's the perception is he's trying to be paid among the top wide receivers in the league. And he's been that, but he's also been hurt now 2 out of the last 3 years. That you have to take that into account.
Doesn't it feel like he's just total mercenary status now, in that teams will just wait to see what they really need if they feel like they have a chance to go for it, and he might be signed after the season starts by someone for that reason?
Oh, I don't think
just remain out there?
It won't be that long.
You think it'll be before the season?
I mean, how many 13
I think
teams were watching it work out?
He's 30 years old now. Regardless, he's definitely mercenary status.
Well, so where I think the hands are tied a bit, he's got a very specific list of where he wants to be. He wants to play for a contender. He's not going back to Los Angeles for that. He's not going to Arizona if they trade Hopkins. It's not going to be Odell. If that's the reason why you're signing with the team, he's going to go to Kansas City or Buffalo, right? Or you pair up with one of the East, Baltimore, pair up with Lamar Jackson.
Wouldn't it be fun to watch him with Patrick Mahomes? That's an experiment I'd like to see.
Yeah.
See how that works out.
Juju Smith-Schuster ends up with a new contract off of playing with Mahomes. But, that's a great example of where Odell Beckham lands. And it's going to make a difference for that team. Not like Kansas City needs to get over the hump, but that's where you could certainly have a massive star for the league who's better than 95% of the wide receivers across the league. And Andy Reid would do great things with him. Does this happen
before training camp?
I think so. I think it could happen right before the draft once teams determine what they're going to do. But I wouldn't jump out there and start paying that money for him when you have the option of doing it a year ago in a trade for AJ, or if you want to look around and think about what Tyreek Hill meant to Miami. I would try to find the speed in the draft and then come back over the top with Odell Beckham Jr. He could also end up in Dallas, though. Yeah. Dallas didn't want to sign. They just traded for Brandon Cooks, but Dallas didn't want to sign Dalton Schultz to big money in order to keep some options open.
And we know how much Jerry Jones loves stars, not just the star on the side of the helmet. He loves stars in general. So that would make a ton of sense.
And they didn't want to
bring in Odell Beckham Jr.
He didn't want to pay Zeke Elliott either. Hit us up with your thoughts. Outkick 360. Best NFL free agents remaining. The list is thin. I was looking at the starters. Printed this off this morning. The names don't jump out to you. This is why you wait for the draft. Let's see. Cornerback Christian Gonzalez. That's my rookie list. Brandon Cooks traded. Other notable contracts recently. Let's see. Edwards recently signed. And it's just a bunch of backups, really. Von Bell to the Panthers. Nothing that really jumps out. The best free agent right now is Lamar Jackson. He's eligible.
And no one's talking to him.
Zeke Elliott, DJ Chark is at wide receiver. Bobby Wagner at linebacker. Rock Ya-Sin, Chad. Rock Ya-Sin at corner.
Rock Ya-Sin sucks. We saw that firsthand in the AFC South for a while.
Yeah, Corey
Not
Davis
very good.
Ripped him up. Coming up, we head back to
great name, though.
It's great.
Terrific name.
We head back to the bracket where we should rip up that as well. And look at it from this perspective. Which storyline is the most unlikely to play out, but Chad, you and I would be willing to bet on? Where does the line stop for the odds to win a national championship?
I've got three
stunned.
that have very, very low odds that I feel bullish on all
That's
three.
what I'm saying. I'm really surprised about the gap between Alabama and Houston.
Well, I'm surprised about
else.
who's so far down that list. I'll explain when we come back.
Yeah, that's next on Outkick 360.
What you're experiencing is the bold taste of a Southern legend. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Authentic Tennessee mountain-style spirits. We believe in crafting flavors that were born from tradition but defy expectation. And pioneering a new experience with every sip. Because if it doesn't do this, it ain't this. Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. Come on.
Welcome into Outkick the show. I am Clay Travis, your fearless leader.
I am going to continue to argue that sports is one of the great unifying forces in all of American life.
ESPN is a sinking ship. Democrats are now the party of the white, woke college graduate.
So the higher that number can be, the better you are with the committee. It's really that simple.
You gotta lean into the turns. You really got to lean into the turns.
He's got incredible taste in which media figures he listens to.
Very difficult to go back-to-back years in the NFL with the number 1 overall pick.
I've been out of LA long enough to have forgotten that libs, no matter how ridiculous the scenario, are gonna live. Another week of inflation, another week with Biden with COVID, and another set of losers to crown. People don't watch the WNBA on TV, in person, on a plane, on a train, on a bus, or on purpose.
The scary thing, Tommy, is in the history of this government, I've never seen them give anything back that they've taken.
Oh, no, they never do.
And they won't.
Why are we going through Melania's goods? Don't make Brittany Griner out to be some type freedom fighter. Shouldn't there be a little bit of common sense? Let's roll them, big boy. What do you got?
They want to find someone to be the face of domestic terrorism, and they want it to be a right-wing Trump supporter. Don't let them entrap you into doing something dumb. But they were hyper-rational. They looked at the data, and they said it makes no sense for me to submit to this COVID shot mandate.
Get the shot or you can't go to your brother's wedding. Get the shot or you can't go to your daughter's graduation. Get the shot or else.
Old Smoky Moonshine and Whiskey. A bold taste of a Southern legend.
Chad, I'm looking at the college basketball championship futures. Alabama, your favorite, plus 320, followed by Houston at plus 400. Then there's a drop. UCLA, plus 850. UConn, plus 900. Creighton and Texas are the next two schools after that. Tennessee at plus 1,100. Gonzaga is plus 1,200. The middle of the pack, to me, is way undervalued for the betting public currently.
Let me give you three at each level
Okay.
that I love right now. I think Alabama's going to win, but if I'm taking a chance on one of these long shots, Connecticut, who you mentioned, fourth in line right now at plus 900. I love the way they look. Gonzaga at below the odds of Tennessee shocks me for this Gonzaga team, honestly. Tennessee at plus 1,100, Gonzaga at plus 1,200. Love the Zags at plus 1,200. And finally, the 14th out of 16 teams, Miami, plus 4,800.
Yeah.
I would throw $5 on that and not ask any questions right now. That Miami team, what do you need more than anything in the NCAA tournament? Veteran guards. They have two of the best guards in the country in Isaiah Wong and Nigel Pack. They are terrific. I am done underestimating them in the tournament. They went to the Elite Eight a year ago. They knocked off Auburn, who I think was a 2 seed in round 2 last year. They've looked really good so far. They dominated Indiana last night.
Yep.
I love the way Miami's playing.
What do you think about Texas? We've got Rodney Terry. He's 21-7 now as the coach since Chris Beard was fired with cause. And I mean, he's earned the job now.
Yeah,
he's going to get the low. He's going to get the low
full-time
buyout. They'll adjust the buyout. You give him the job because you're not going to see like a Scott Drew take that gig, right? I don't know who else you would look to in the moment. He's at 21-7 in the Sweet 16. You hand the keys to him.
Yeah, he's been terrific. I mean, if you think about everything that could have gone wrong after the whole deal with Chris Beard, and he's dismissed early in the season, Rodney Terry has been unbelievable. It doesn't matter what he does from here on out. He's earned a long-term contract from Texas. He is their head coach moving forward. I don't think there's any doubt about that. There's not much of a decision to be made, quite frankly. You give Rodney Terry the extension, and you remove the interim label, and you make him the full-time head coach in Austin.
The team I can't wrap my mind around right now is Creighton, and where I see them going through all this.
They flat out said no to our request for an interview with Greg McDermott, so they're at the bottom of my list now too. Creighton will go out in the next game after having done that. It's karma is what it is.
Roger Goodell has been commissioner of the NFL for just about 20 years, and he's going to get an extension from the owners. That's no surprise. Although a couple months ago we did hear, I believe Jerry Jones let it be known about the contract structure for the commissioner and how he wanted it changed. He was the only one from the fund of the finance committee of all the owners to not say universally, yeah, Goodell's our guy. Let's present this. He had the dissenting vote there. He's 64 years old, Roger Goodell, and entered the league in 2006. Coincidentally, that was also when Pac-Man Jones was going through his suspension out in Vegas. About 12 months into the league at that point. His current deal expires at the end of next season. And earlier, if you just joined us, Andrew Brandt was on with us, and I asked him, like, where does Goodell want to leave his legacy and turn things over to the new commissioner? And I think it's in Europe. I think it's more of a global conquering that he wants to open the door for. We're now seeing multiple games in Germany. 5 games will be played in Europe next year. They continue to add games overseas, and that's only going to continue as they continue to branch out. And I said, maybe it was about a year ago now, I think we'll see a division of 4 teams in London or within a travel distance of Europe, and that's where we'll see Goodell at the end of his tenure, at the end of this contract, hand things off to the new commissioner. I think that's what the owners are pushing for, and he knows based on what they're doing by going over there every year and adding this platform of multiple teams, not just Jacksonville, that's where we're headed with all this.
I don't think they even have to go that far. I think that they're already expanding globally by playing more games over there. In a world where I can watch a documentary about a Welsh football club, soccer club, owned by Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhaney called Wrexham. And then I see that Wrexham is touring the United States because so many people watched a documentary about the team, and they have a lot of interest here. I just feel like that's the way the world is opening up in so many ways. There are watch parties for English Premier League clubs all over the U.S. early in the morning, every Sunday, every Saturday, whenever they play. It's going to be the same for the NFL. That's the next frontier. I don't think you even have to make the investment in teams in Europe to make that work. He's already doing that. None of this surprises me. He makes those owners so much money. Not that a lot of people couldn't do the same with the NFL and what that product means right now, but he's done it. He's continued to grow the brand, the product, making everyone money. So this announcement, it does not surprise me one bit.
No, and here's why you want the division, though. You want the TV rights in Europe. What's Sky Sports going to pay for that? What would Apple or Amazon bundled together get for just being able to air that, plus have the exclusive rights to that, plus what would be going on here with Thursday Night Football? They're getting $1 billion for Thursday Night Football right now. So if you open the door to that with more markets and more TV money, that's why Roger Goodell last season made around $64 million on his contract. For comparison, Rob Manfred made $10 million. And, Adam Silver made $10 million. It was Manfred who made $17.5. Goodell's getting upwards of $65 to $70 million with all that. So
Adam Silver will make a lot more when he's the Disney CEO.
Yeah, that'll be a nice little bonus.
That's a much more profitable gig.
Yes. Chad, the mother who was so upset watching her son lose in a state final match has gone viral. CBS Sports is where I found this, but she is crying as the wrestling state championships are going on, as her son is pinned to the mat, and she rips off her glasses and just proceeds to bundle them up like I would this piece of paper and crack them and throw them. And then she's consoled by a friend as she gets rid of her glasses and tosses them away.
This woman was an alternate for the United States judo team at the Olympics. You need to seek counseling on this one.
Yeah.
Okay? Your
It's
son
over the top.
was going for a 4th national championship and lost the semis. It is a devastating moment, no doubt, and disappointing.
But
he's won 3 national titles.
Now imagine,
and you gotta hold your water a little better than snapping your spectacles in front of everyone when that happens.
I see drill sergeant type household there. You got to get out and run and train constantly. Get on the mats.
If this kid was under 18, child services would be sent to their house if people witnessed it. And from the stands, if this was like an 8-year-old wrestling match, then they would probably call someone on you.
Now put her in the Little League stands. I guarantee you it's much worse. Much worse.
Speaking of that, that's where I'm headed tonight.
I know.
Coaching softball.
Chad's got his lineups ready.
Little League stands. Ready to go.
You're still unbeaten, right?
We're 1-0. Yeah, so we're unbeaten. We'll go for 2-0 tonight.
Run rule. Give the points. Lay the points. Spread's 11 runs, by the way, Chad.
We've got the Alabama winning a national title type odds tonight.
Great place to be. Also right here at 3 o'clock Eastern tomorrow for Outkick 360.